Good afternoon. In the absence of the chair, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. I understand we're running a bit behind, so we want to keep things moving along. The first item up after lunch is EY 29.19, which is application for fence exemption, 89 Silver Hill Drive. At this time, I'll call for a speaker. That is Sarita Samaru Secretaris. I tried. Thank you, welcome, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you for having me today, Council. I'm the owner of 89 Silver Hill Drive. I have lived in Etobicoke all my life for 37 years. I also have my law office here at Four Seasons Place, and the issue at hand is the reason for the erection of the fence to begin with was as a result of some behavior for our neighbors at 91 Silver Hill Drive, continuing to place garbage bins at the corner of our driveway. The fence was erected simply for privacy. There was not a fence between us. The neighboring property has 3 feet from their door up to the property line, and they simply had a pathway to exit from their their side door. And what we have done is we erected within bylaws, the regulations, we've been permitted to erect a 6-foot wooden fence and then a 4-foot wrought iron fence, which extends, it doesn't extend up to the property line, it extends 2 feet back from the property line. So we've extended it essentially, the wrought iron fence, 6 feet. From the 8-foot setback that is permitted. So we're asking today for that exemption. And it's been an unfortunate set of circumstances. Just to give you some history, we did move into the property. It was newly built by a builder, a custom home builder, in November of 2016. At that time, we had a good relationship with our neighbors. We did notice after a little period of time that they would continuously place their garbage on our driveway, and we approached them very kindly to say, you know, would you kindly remove your garbage and place a pickup point for your garbages on your driveway. They insisted that the curb cut, which extends out from our driveway to a portion of their property, was in fact their property. We investigated this with Tony Almeida, who is head of transportation. He advised us, and again confirmed it with me today while I was here at the building, that that is municipal property, that curb cut. However, that is not for the placement of bins, and that is strictly for transportation of vehicles. And I know that that is not the matter before council today. However, I do want to explain the reasoning as to why we did erect a fence. It's quite unfortunate because we did have a civil relationship with the neighbors previous to this. But again, they continue to insist. We've had to make, there's been threatening behavior from the son, who is, I believe, is here today. And, we've had to call the police on a couple of occasions. And unfortunately, this behavior continues. We've been advised by Waste Management that we can have the collection point determined through them, and then of course they did advise that the bin should be placed on their driveway, and that Waste Management can ensure that moving forward that their garbage is no longer picked up. So that is something we will pursue in the future. However, at the current moment, for the exemption and for the purposes of the fence exemption, we're here today just so that we have some form of privacy, and we can stop our neighbors from continuing to trespass on our property to roll their bins onto our driveway.
Thank you. Questions? I do. Deputy Mayor Hawley, to question. Thanks for speaking to us. I've got a couple. The first is there is a plan that's been submitted. It looks like maybe something you might have prepared. Hold it up.
Oh, sure.
Silver Hill Drive.
Yes, that's just to show you where the fence is located and how far we've extended it out. My husband did it on a drawing.
Yep.
So
So
that
the,
you can see.
the first 6 meters are a wood fence, and then you want to do the last 2.4 meters in wrought iron.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
They seem to be going through what looks like a bush or a garden.
No, they do not. Actually, the fence is actually on our property line. It's actually over onto our property. It's not even right on the property line. We've actually put it over onto our property.
So it's just a bubble on the drawing. It's not a bush that you're.
That's
planting.
correct. Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
this architectural drawing.
The wrought iron, can you describe what the fence is? Is it see-through or is it?
It is, yeah, it is see-through, and it meets the height requirements of 4 feet. It just extends out a little bit further than what is permitted. So the exemption is just strictly for an additional, I believe it was 6 feet that we've extended. It should have been 2 feet. It's 6 feet. So that's, yeah. And it's just to prevent the trespassing because, again, as I mentioned earlier, the garbage bins from our neighbors have been rolled onto our driveway. They have continued to trespass onto our driveway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor DeGiorgio, the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to, for clarification,
Yes.
as I understand what I'm reading, it is only the wrought iron fence that's at issue? It's
Yes.
the height of the wrought iron.
Oh, not even the height. So, Councillor, it's actually at the correct height. It's just a matter of it being extended out a little bit further. I do have, I don't know if, can I put the photos?
Okay, I got it.
Yeah,
What's
that'd
the
be
actual
great.
setback from the front lot line? What is it supposed to be? 2.4 meters and you're how far away?
We're about, we've extended about 2.1 meters out, I believe. 2.1.
Okay, so we're
Yes.
talking about 0.3 meters, 1 foot that needs to be, all right, thank you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, this is the next guy.
And,
Okay.
did you
Any
want-
further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you very much.
We got quorum.
Did you want to see the photo at all?
You can pass,
Yeah,
we'll
circulate it.
pass,
Oh,
circulate it.
pass it? Okay, sure.
Okay,
Yes, please. Thank
our
you.
next speaker, Salvatore Del Mastro. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Salvatore Del Maestro, next door neighbor, 91 Silver Hill Drive. I'm here to speak on behalf of the fence, obviously, and I'm just going to say one sec. There was a threat at one time because of the verbal language used towards my senior parents. Words I've now used are my worst enemy. And again, it carries on with them. So the fence is a good thing. Unfortunately, we got to follow bylaws, and the bylaw states that they've gone beyond it. It's written in black and white. I mean, if we can go across bylaws and maybe I'd like to have a taller fence right across the whole lot, like a brick wall or something, but we can't. We got to go by the way it is. We do have, and there's 7 houses on that street. We're one of the 7 houses that the side door is built on the opposite side of the driveway. So my parents being seniors, 78, 79 years old, they've been there for 33 years. They wheel their garbage. They come out the side door and their garbage bin's on that side and they wheel it down that side. It's a lot easier for them. So we don't go on their driveway at first before the fence was there. Everything was fine. We wheeled about a half foot on our driveway, which is fine. Obviously not, but so we did put in for a permit for a walkway to carry all the way down. And we will, so the garbage isn't on their driveway. We got 4 feet all the way down from that wall, all the way down to the curb. Spoke to bylaw officers about it, and we are allowed to place our garbage there. So it's been there for 33 years. It's a lot easier for my parents. They're elderly people, and we're not asking for much. So if they want to keep the fence can be kept. I don't really care about it, but I think we should go by bylaws. They're there for a reason. Thank you.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Any further deputants to the item before bringing it to committee? Seeing none. Speakers, Councillor DeChanos given direction to Councillor Nunziata. Councillor
Can I
Nunziata.
ask you a question?
Oh, sorry. Questions of staff. Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Thanks. Mr. Chair? Alex, can you help me understand what the exemption is for? I know that there are setbacks from the lot line at a driveway for site reasons, but where have we run afoul of the bylaw in this case?
So, Deputy Mayor, in this situation, they have constructed the fence with the 2.4 meter lot line setback in place. They're seeking permission to go right to the edge of the property line where the city right-of-way meets the private portion of the property
Right.
to continue the fence down the driveway. As they've indicated, they intend on making it see-through, so as it does run down the side of the driveway, there would be no sightline obstructions. And there is the sidewalk, there's no sidewalk on that side of the street. So they're just requesting permission in advance of construction.
Would I be recalling the fence bylaws correctly if I say that in olden days, in past time, short fences were allowed right up to the property line, and in modern times, we just keep the area clear?
That's-
And presumably for sightline reasons.
That would be a fair assumption.
And you're satisfied that the proposed fence is see-through and doesn't create a sightline hazard?
Based on the proposal put forth today and speaking with the property owner at 89 Silver Hill, I am satisfied with that requirement that it will be see-through.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Any further questions of staff? Seeing none, Councillor Nunziata to speak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So on behalf of the local councillor, unfortunately, he couldn't be here this afternoon. I'm going to move recommendation 2, which is to grant the application for a fence exemption.
Thank you. Any further speakers to the item? Seeing none, Councillor Nunziata has moved on behalf of Councillor Chano, recommendation number 2 to allow the fence exemption. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. 29.20 amendment, application for fence exemption 22 Summerfield Crescent. Speaker Rob Salvetta. Good morning, Mr. Salvetta, or good afternoon. Thank you for your patience today.
Yeah, that's fine.
You have 5 minutes, sir.
Just a quick statement. The reason my fence is so high is because we've had numerous attempted break-ins and one successful. And unfortunately, over the years, my neighbor is a renter, a landlord, and probably 22 years, there's been 5 years that the house has been unoccupied. So it's just, we live at the end of the street facing the 427 highway wall, so it's a collection area for people at times. And the reason the fence is there too is we have a hot tub and it's for privacy. And basically that's the reason. And I appreciate Deputy Mayor for coming up, taking a look at the house. I got nothing to hide. So I just want to put the application through if possible. And one quick question, if the application does go through, is there any guidelines for repairs that maybe you guys can inform me if it does go through?
So, Mr. Salvetta, the process doesn't allow you to ask us questions, but I'm sure the Deputy Mayor will come down and talk to you about the process after,
Okay, no
or give him a
problem.
call, but he'll probably come down and talk to you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, maybe I will ask.
Okay, Deputy Mayor? Questions of the
Yep.
Deputy? Yep.
No, of staff.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, you're good.
Maybe I'll ask, just to help, maybe we can get the question answered. Mr. Salvetta, could you just explain, I think you wanted to do some repairs because the fence was tilting a little bit right now?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a tilt. I'm just worried, maybe in the future that there's something that may have to be repaired. I just don't know what
So
how that
the
goes.
request right now is to grant the height exemption and allow you to fix the fence so it doesn't stay unmodified, but with the spirit of the granting of it, you'd like to fix that tilt.
Correct.
Great, thank you very much. I'll
Thank
just
you.
ask,
No, just a second.
I'm trying to save time. We're
Any
behind.
further deputants to the item? Any further speakers? Seeing none, questions of staff? Deputy Mayor Holliday, questions of staff?
Maybe we can help clear it up for Mr. Salvetta. I'm assuming, can you just verify that, that should we grant an exemption on the height, that Mr. Salvetta can keep the fence in good repair without any running amok of the bylaws?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, if the exemption is granted today, he has to maintain it at that height, but it would be permitted, as you said, yes.
So to fix a lean or whatever's, whatever.
The fence would have to be maintained, yes. So that
Excellent.
would be fine.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Any further questions of staff? Seeing none, Deputy Mayor Holliday?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move recommendation number 2, which is to grant the application for a fence exemption by the property owner of 22 Summerfield Crescent.
Okay, Deputy Mayor is moving recommendation number 2 to allow the exemption. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 2921, front yard parking appeal, 49 Arda Street. Are there any speakers on Arda Street? Front yard parking, my favorite subject. No speakers? Questions of staff? Seeing none, Councillor Doucette to speak.
Thank you very much. I will be moving the alternate recommendations The owners are here today, but they decided not to speak today, but I have spoken with them, and they are in obviously support of the alternate recommendations. And basically, they were short on the, it's here because it's a negative poll, and these negative polls are interesting. This one's missing 1.5 votes, so that meant that they had to appeal it and be here before us today. So to keep it short and simple, as I say, they will not be taking a spot off the street. Everything is good. They're nodding at me. They're happy. So alternate recommendations.
Okay, Councillor Doucette is moving the alternate recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 2922, front yard parking appeal, 46 Bicknell Avenue. Any speakers on Bicknell Avenue? Bicknell Avenue, last call. Bicknell Avenue. Seeing none. Questions of staff? Seeing none. Councillor DeGiorgio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be moving alternative 2, the alternative simply because the owner has agreed to comply with the conditions of alternative 2, which involves replacement of pavement with permeable material and with the actual width and length of the parking pad. So I'm prepared to recommend approval.
Okay, so Councillor George moving the alternate recommendations. Motion's on the screen. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 2923, front yard parking appeal, 62 Raymond Avenue. Any speakers on Raymond Avenue? Speakers on Raymond Avenue? Seeing none. Questions of staff? Seeing none. Councillor Doucette.
I will be once again approving the alternate recommendation, and on this one in the poll they were missing a half a vote, which would have meant they did not have to come before us today and did not have to appeal this and did not have to spend the extra $600. So I will be supporting the alternate recommendations.
Any further speakers? Seeing none. All in favor of the alt recs? Opposed? Carried. 2924, front yard parking appeal, 118 Robina Avenue. Are there speakers on Robina Avenue? No? Seeing none? Questions of staff? Seeing none. Councillor Palacio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to move the alternate recommendations on this application. The poll is positive. The majority of people in the neighborhood are in favor of it. And the reason that this application is before us is because they didn't have enough of the soft landscaping as required. Otherwise, it's a good application. Thank you.
Further speakers? Seeing none. Councillor Palacio is moving the alternate recommendations. They're on the screen. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 2925, front yard parking appeal, 125 Trowell Avenue. Any speakers on Trowell Avenue? Come forward, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
I'm okay, and I'm comfortable deferring to Councillor DeGiorgio. The only thing I'd like to highlight is I do have positive poll results. Everything within the application has followed everything required for bylaw. And if you look at my area and my street, there are only 2 permits that have been granted to date. Yes, hello, sorry. There are 2 permits that have been granted to date. Both of them are my own. So if you see my plans that have been drafted in your package, the only difference I have in the one that was drafted for me is there's a city-granted tree, which Urban Forestry has approved or said is feasible. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Any further speakers? Seeing none. Questions of staff? Seeing none. Councillor DeGiorgio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be moving the alternative to permit the front yard parking pad.
Okay, so Councillor George moving the alt recommendations. The motions are on the screen. Not yet. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 2926, application for noise exemption, 4650 Eglinton Avenue West. Kim Krutz. Kim? Good afternoon. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'm Kim Cruz from Trogget, here on behalf of Shanix. At 4650 Eglinton Avenue West, we're building a 4-tower development, 9 stories high. This project's going to go on for another 1.5 years, and I want to work with the neighbors in the city to make sure that we're within the noise bylaw standards. Quick history, there was an infraction December 28th sent to us. We applied for a noise exemption permit on January 4th. It was refused on January 8th, and we sent in an appeal on January 11th. The main issue is the TMC Chapter 591 noise bylaw. States that there can't be any construction activity after 7 p.m. or before 7 a.m. However, subsection B1 does not apply to the continuous pouring of concrete, which is the only work that we are doing. We typically finish our construction by 3 or 4 p.m., and then it's just the concrete finishers. So I'd like to address any questions.
Any questions?
I'll ask a quick one.
Deputy Mayor Holliday to question.
Thank you for speaking to us today. Councillor Campbell has asked me to carry this item, so I'll right into it a little bit. In the list of activities, there's a generator listed. Can you explain why you are using that?
Yep. At night, when the concrete finishers are working, there are light towers so that they can see where they're working. Those are the only generators that we have on site.
And just to confirm, there's nothing that you're asking us for today that has anything to do with something other than finishing concrete?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No further questions? Thank you, sir. Any further speakers to the item? No further speakers. Questions of staff? Please. Little time rock and roll. Questions of staff. Questions of staff. Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Thank you. If I place a question to MLS, please. Alex, I just want to confirm, my understanding is, notwithstanding that there's a request for noise exemption before us for a number of activities, they don't necessarily describe what those activities are for, but the noise bylaw allows for continuous pour concrete.
That is correct. The noise bylaw does permit continuous pour.
No exemption is required for that?
There is no exemption required for that.
And no exemption is required for the activities directly associated with a continuous pour, which includes the power trowels, heating equipment, things that you deal with concrete with.
That's correct. As long as it's associated with the continuous pour, it is permitted.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Nunziata, a question?
Just a question. So originally this application was refused? And that's why it's like, was it refused by what, the local councillor? Or?
It was initially refused by the local councillor. That's correct.
And that's why it's here.
That's what triggered the report to be brought before council.
The appeal.
Today. That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Questions, staff? Nope. No further questions of staff? Speakers, Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to move the refusal, and I'm going to explain that in just a moment. And I'm also going to move that we send a copy of the noise bylaw to the applicant, which would properly explain the prohibitions and the permissions. So after looking in this a little bit and speaking to MLS staff, I understand that the continuous pour of concrete is actually not before council right now. Notwithstanding what the report says, the noise bylaw grants an exemption for somebody that is doing the continuous pour. I take it the process didn't identify the exact nature of the activities that was on the noise exemption, and therefore the report was triggered and was brought to us here. But as the speaker said, they aren't going to be doing anything that is outside of the finishing of the continuous pour concrete. And therefore the refusal of the application actually doesn't harm their operations. And I believe that's the wishes of Councillor Campbell. And just to make sure that everyone's clear on it, I'm suggesting that the clerk mail out a copy of the noise bylaw to the applicant so that it's very clear. And if anyone else in the surrounding neighborhood has any questions about that, they can also check the bylaw about what is permitted as of right and what is not permitted under the bylaw. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Seeing none, Deputy Mayor Holliday's on this, motion's on the screen on behalf of Councillor Campbell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, Councillor DeGiorgio, can you deal with 2937? Traffic calming poll results, King George's Drive between Keel Street and Trethewey Drive. You held the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was working with the Transportation Department, and we've come up with a motion that they believe is appropriate for, and so if the clerk can put it on the screen, I would just ask that we adopt those
Councilor
recommendations.
George, will you please read it out? We're just having I can't see that.
It says that the Etobicoke Yard Community Council approved the installation of traffic calming on King George's between King Street and Keel Street and Thurthui. And then it talks about preparing a draft bylaw for installing 2 speed humps on that section of roadway, and direct transportation services to take the necessary actions to reduce speed limit from 40 to 30 kilometers between Keel Street and Thurthui Drive.
Okay, so you're striking out the staff recommendation, moving what's on the screen? All in favor, recorded vote. Councilor DeGiorgio, Councilor Doucette, Councilor Palacio, Councilor Nunziata, Councilor Grimes, Councilor Mamalidi, Councilor Ford, opposed, Deputy Mayor Holliday. That carries. And Councilor DeGiorgio, 54.
Yeah, again,
Hang on,
Mr.
one
Chairman.
second, one second. Is that the walk on Rosemary? One sec. One second. Bear with me, Councilor DeGiorgio. So this is 2522, 2542 Keel Street, availability of section 37 minutes from under the official plan policies. And this is a report request, is that correct?
Yeah, and we'd approved recommendation number 1, and in my discussions with legal, they agreed that I could add this additional recommendation. So as number 2, just add this as an additional recommendation. It's in compliance with whatever tests that we have to meet in putting forward motions.
I'd like to hear comments from the solicitor.
Okay. Are you finished speaking, Councilor DeGiorgio?
Yes, in essence.
Okay, so can we get a comment from our solicitor?
This is a reopening of item 29.54. Just generally, there's a report on the agenda for City Council that was deferred from City Council at the last meeting that will also be at City Council at the next meeting. And so 2954 is an additional request.
So is this a reopening?
This is a reopening
So we have to
request.
reopen it first?
That's right.
Okay. And it's in order? It's in order?
We had already dealt with, this was already ruled in order and dealt with.
Okay, so motion to reopen. Councilor DeGiorgio, all in favor? Opposed, carried. Councilor DeGiorgio's motion's on the screen. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, our last item. 29.2, final report, 555 Rexdale Boulevard, zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision applications. We have a number of speakers. Our first speaker is Steve Watson.
Councilor Grimes?
I'm sorry.
We had asked the staff
I'm sorry, Mr. Watson, sorry. The staff have asked to do a brief presentation, and then we'll get into the deputation. So, Mr. Cresswell, the floor is yours. Or Ms. Tom.
Great, thanks, Mike.
Bend the mic down.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get
Lights? It's good. Okay, Kathy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We're here for the applications for 555 Rexdale, the Woodbine Racetrack lands. The Woodbine racetrack lands are located in the northwest part of the city, bounded by Highway 427 on the west, Rexdale Boulevard on the north, Highway 27 on the east, and the rail tracks on the south. It's got a total of about 680 acres altogether, and we're only dealing with the northern half at this point in time. The official plan designation on all of the properties is employment areas. It also has 2 site and area specific policies. Policy number 29 is the Lester B. Pearson operating area, which places noise contours on the property. And policy 296, which was the previous official plan amendment for the Woodbine Live proposal, that added additional uses onto the site for entertainment, retail, and all office uses and that kind of thing for their proposal. The existing zoning is IC2, which requires the zoning bylaw amendments that you'll see shortly. The Woodbine Live proposal resulted in a site-specific bylaw that implemented the official plan amendment. That's bylaw 864/2007, and it's still active on the site. And also existing on the site is the minister's zoning order from 1998, allowing slots and electronic games to operate on the site. So a bit of background before we move into what's before you today. So this is all helps to set up for today's decisions. In July of 2007, the city approved the Woodbine Live proposal and enacted the bylaw and the official plan amendment for that. In May of 2013, for expanded gaming within the downtown and at Woodbine, that was not approved by council at that time. In July of 2015, the expanded gaming at Woodbine came forward solely, and City Council approved that in principle, subject to 21 conditions being satisfactorily met. In August of 2017, the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Commission selected the Ontario Gaming Group to operate the gaming at Woodbine. So in July of 2015, Council approved in principle expanded gaming subject to 21 conditions. The conditions are sort of grouped into certain large areas of interest. Conditions 1 to 12 are related to planning matters generally, and conditions 13 to 21 are then what we call the social conditions. In July of 2015, Council outlined a process of how it would consider the applications coming forward at Woodbine. And the planning applications would go forward to Community Council and be dealt with in the usual manner. And Council then directed that the city manager was to report back on how the 21 conditions had been met and give a recommendation. And this was to come back through to City Council through the Executive Committee. So before you today, you have a number of applications on the property. 2 zoning applications that would allow for expanded gaming, and we'll get into what expanded gaming means, in both the grandstand itself, the grandstand building, and into an area that has now been designated for the gaming. We also have a draft plan of subdivision that you'll be making that is before you today, which is dividing the property into development blocks and creating public roads and a public park. There are also currently and just recently submitted 2 site plan applications on various blocks within the subdivision that enact both the gaming district development and development for Woodbine Square, which is complementary on the other side of the Queens Plate Drive. So to get into a bit more detail on the applications, the grandstand application would be a site-specific, is to amend the site-specific bylaw that's currently on the property to allow for live dealer games in addition to the slots and electronic games that are already permitted on the property. There are no other land use permissions that are asked for within this bylaw amendment. And you can see the shaded area on the map there is the area of the existing grandstand to which this site-specific bylaw would apply to. There's a second zoning application for the gaming district, which is approximately 33 acres to the east of the grandstand, and it's doing a similar thing, permitting live dealer tables within the existing gaming structure onto these lands, and it's also making certain other land use changes and technical things for parking standards that would apply to this area. The subdivision plan is up before you, and it was submitted in May of last year, and revisions were submitted in December. And then in February of this year, the applicant submitted a revised proposal for phased registration, so that the area before you that's shaded on the screen is the phase 1 registration, which is the only part of the subdivision that will be registered going forward. Phase 2, the unshaded portions, would be left to some future time to be registered. So what is really being looked at through the plan of subdivision is laying out a framework for the entire area, but registering only those portions of the lands that are of immediate interest in moving forward the gaming district at this point in time. As I mentioned, there's 2 site plan applications in. Just for information, they're not before you today for any decisions. There's the application for Woodbine Square, which is block 9 on the subdivision plan you saw before, and it's on the Woodbine Entertainment Group side of the property, and it proposes 5 commercial buildings along with improvements to the walking ring, landscaping, and transportation improvements. And it's important that we look at these buildings in conjunction with what's going on in the gaming district, so that we can see that the integration and compatibility between the 2 areas is being achieved. The gaming district is close to 1 million square feet of development. It's on block 10 in the subdivision application, and it's a 3-story development with a casino, restaurants, hotel, 2 hotels, performance venue, and a parking garage, as well as some office uses relating to the new collector road. It's got connections into the existing grandstand at a number of levels, so it achieves complete integration into the grandstand. The main entrance for the casino is from Queens Plate Drive, and just at the close to the bottom of Queens Plate Drive, where the entrance to the existing grandstand is also. So on the screen before you is a slide that shows how the gaming district and Woodbine Square and the grandstand all relate to each other, and it's important to keep this in mind when we're looking at the condition of council, condition number 1, about integrated development on the site. And it's this grouping of buildings that starts to achieve a complex on the site and achieve the integration on the site that council was looking for. This is a 3D view of what things will look like. On the left-hand side, you can see the casino complex, and on the right-hand side, you can see the Woodbine Square development with the walking ring in the background creating the focus. So before you today, in your report, staff recommendations, staff is recommending that the two zoning bylaw application amendments be approved, but the bills be held until certain certain conditions are met, and these are laid out in the report. One of the conditions would be that a proposal for the development and construction of Block 9 Woodbine Square be on hand. This has been addressed in the supplementary report with the submissions from Woodbine about their commitment to building and their letter of credit. That a community benefits agreement be entered into, a subdivision agreement be entered into, that a notice of decision under the Planning Act for the subdivision be issued, and there are also various other technical matters of support studies and that kind of thing. We also advise that the draft plan of subdivision would be approved as well, with the chief planner having that delegated authority. The report also recommends a number of matters to be included in the subdivision agreement, and this is staff's advice on how to ensure that we achieve the goals that council set out in the 21 conditions, so that there would be a community benefits agreement executed by all parties involved. The community benefits agreement would apply to not only the gaming district but the grandstand as well, and the community benefits agreement must be in good standing, so it's in place. There's a requirement that lease arrangements to be included include the provision for the responsibilities of the community benefits agreements to be included in any leases that go on the property, and again that Block 9 should be developed concurrently with these applications. So the 21 conditions that council put on in 2015, 1 to 12 were planning related conditions, and you can see these staff summary of how these have been satisfied in pages 2 to 5 of your report. Condition 1 was an overarching condition, and it's fairly wordy, and it's up on the screen, about integration and concurrent building on the site with the gaming district. And the key elements to it were an integrated entertainment complex, consistent with the previous Woodbine Live proposal, and an integrated complex that would be built concurrently with expanded gaming. So the recommendations for both the holding of the zoning bills and the matters to be included in the subdivision agreement give the assurance that condition 1 would be met in accordance with what council had outlined in its condition 1. Staff also advised that conditions 2 to 12 are also have also been met and deal with more detailed sort of planning matters. So before council today, you've got the for consideration is the 2 zoning bylaw amendments, one for the grandstand and one for the gaming district to allow for the live gaming into those areas. You've got a draft plan of subdivision application with conditions, and you've got staff's comments and review of conditions 1 to 12. The other conditions 13 to 21, are going to be dealt with in the city manager and by the city manager in his report back to city council through executive committee, and they're not before you today for consideration or any matters, so it's just conditions 1 to 12 and the planning matters that are before you. Okay.
Thank you, Catherine. I was just going to ask you that. So what's before us today, to be clear, is 1 to 12. Those conditions will be dealt with at this community council. 13 to 21. Those conditions will go through executive committee, through the city, with the city manager, and on to council. So what's before us is the planning from 1 to 12, correct? Just to be clear.
That's clear.
Okay, we can lift those lights back up. Any questions? Should we take questions of staff at the end, probably, right? Yeah, okay. Okay. Thank you, Catherine, and we'll just get your time to get out, then we'll go to deputations.
Sorry. Chair Grimes, can I just clear up one thing?
Mr. Cresswell?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Tom is quite right that what's in front of you are the staff opinions on conditions 1 to 12. So it's not recommendations on conditions 1 to 12. Ultimately, those are council's decision as to whether they've been satisfied. What we're doing is we're offering our opinion as to our belief that they have been satisfied. So it's ultimately city council that will decide on that when this report matches up with conditions 13 through 21 at city council.
Got it. We're doing the questions at the end. We're going to hear the deputies first, okay?
I don't know how to get out of it now. Just unplug it? Yeah, there's another presentation to come, that's all.
Our first deputy, Mr. Watson, you're back up again. Thank you, sir. Thanks for your patience. I had him up already, I had to slow down. If you had been here, you would have known that. So good afternoon, welcome, sir. You have 5 minutes. You can do your deputation. We get to ask you questions. We don't answer your questions, but we get to ask you questions.
I have copies of my deputation.
Give it to Brad right here.
Have they been distributed? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, beautiful, thanks. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to make a deputation this afternoon on the matter of the Woodbine Casino expansion. I wish to make it clear right from the start that although I live a little more than a kilometer away from the Woodbine Casino, I don't have any vested interest in this project. I'm speaking simply to the fact that my only concern is that I live in a strong and healthy community. That's it. Now, I've carefully read the tracking status final report on item EY 29.2 regarding zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision applications. And I'm pleased to see several references under recommendation 5 to community benefits agreement, and the report that we just heard refers to such a thing. The content of such an agreement and the process of arriving at it, of course, are not spelled out. And I understand that a CBA or community benefits agreement and the route to it are matters to be determined by the city. Yet I would still like to take this opportunity to address the city councilors from Etobicoke, York, the ones most directly concerned with the Woodbine Casino, about what many people in the community think should actually be contained in a community benefits agreement and the way it should be arrived at. For a decade or more, residents of Rexdale have been organizing for a CBA to be part of the Woodbine Casino expansion and have now joined their efforts with the Community Benefits Network, which is a coalition of 80 or more community organizations. It's got a successful track record. An excellent example is the Community Benefits Agreement on the Eglinton Crosstown. So in terms of process, the roadmap to a CBA, we have 3 overriding concerns: that there have to be hard targets, that there has to be an accountability mechanism, and there has to be an agreement with the Community Benefits Network at the table. That doesn't mean that it would be only the CBN at the table, but it should include the Community Benefits Network. Now, there's a number of broad-ranging concerns, and for time reasons, I cannot address them all. But I'm going to speak to a couple of the things that the community has been advocating, things that I have direct knowledge of. For 7 years now, since I retired back in 2011, I've been an English tutor at the Pathways Education Program, which many of you know was centered, well, has many projects throughout the city, but the site where I work is at Jamestown, and the community school that we use is actually West Humber Collegiate. And so I every day I'm engaging in conversation with disadvantaged youth. And also I have been, in my previous life, the staff liaison to the Employee Family Assistance Program of the Canadian Auto Workers Union, which is now Unifor. And while I was in that position, I developed education and awareness courses on addictions, including compulsive behavioral addictions, such as gambling. So anyway, coming back to my role as a tutor for the last 7 years, in my conversations with youth in the community, I know from what they tell me from their own experience, that they almost never put down their address, their actual address on a job application. They always find a friend or a relative who lives in Mississauga or Brampton or some other place and put that as their address. That is simply as a result of what people of color in the community know as postal code discrimination, pure and simple. It's not because of a lack of qualifications. It's simply discrimination based on the area where they live. And I've tutored kids who've gone out to work in the oil fields in Alberta. Not that that's a bad thing, but they can't get jobs in our community. So when we say that there has to be a hard target of at least 60% new hires coming from the community, that's based on reality. That's based on an urgent need. I'd also like to talk about the fact that the hiring policy should be coupled with a casino scholarship program. Now, the program that employs me, I started out as a volunteer, and after several years of volunteering, they finally decided to give me a little job, which I didn't ask for. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to just wrap it up. A scholarship program for the disadvantaged youth would be hugely beneficial. An on-site gambling addiction resource that's very visible to everybody would be wonderful, and a child care facility. The last thing I want to say is that included in my report is a reference to an article in the Globe and Mail, which was a bit counterintuitive, or it actually wasn't really surprising at all. And it was simply the fact that those companies that outperform on the stock market are ones that overachieve on diversity and inclusion. On diversity and inclusion.
Okay,
So
thank you, sir.
it makes sense. It makes sense for business reasons to include diversity, to include inclusion.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
Your time is
very
up.
much.
You have a question, Councillor Palacio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Watson, for coming down. Just a question that, as the senior planner indicated, within the 21 recommendations that were approved by City Council, 1 to 12 referred to planning issues, and the other recommendations, 13 to 21, as related, the city manager will be making a presentation before the executive committee and eventually the City Council. Now, within your submission, and you are expressing some concerns as it relates to the community benefits agreement, and that's part of recommendation 5 of the city staff recommendations as well. So my question to you is, what would you like to see? What change would you like to see from what's been approved by council in relation to your submission?
Well, what's been approved at council, I had a chance to see, and I had an opportunity to see that several weeks ago. And with all due respect, okay, the community has been organizing around this issue for over a decade. And when we looked at that document, we really did not see much of what we've been talking about in terms of local hiring, targets, addressing discrimination, addressing the discrimination against the disadvantaged youth in our community. We didn't see those issues addressed. So the process, as far as we're concerned, is still ongoing. And we understand that that is still in flux, that is still something to be ironed out, something to be hammered out. And a community benefits agreement, by definition, means that there's an agreement. That means that there have to be players. There have to be people that you agree with at the table. Otherwise, how can you say, well, the city is going to come up with a community benefits agreement, but without the inclusion of players in the community? I mean, you could call it a decree, a community benefits decree, but it's not a community benefits agreement unless it includes players in the community. And the Community Benefits Network, which in itself is 80 different organizations, is probably the most credible organization to be part of that process, but it's not the only organization that should be at the table, but it should be one that is at the table. They have the track record, they have the proven track record of being able to negotiate these agreements and actually ensure that the needs of the community are met.
So in essence, you are looking perhaps to renegotiate or the possibility of renegotiating the 21 conditions at whatever point as we move forward with the process. Is that more or less?
If you want to call it renegotiation, that would be perfect terminology for me. To me, it's not complete, or it's not a personal issue for me. For people in the community that I'm familiar with, that I know, the process is not complete. The issues have not been satisfactorily addressed. You just talk to the people in Rexdale about how many public employers in the community actually hire directly from Rexdale. There's people here today who can tell you from personal experience what that actually means. Okay? And we have the opportunity to change that. And we have a window of opportunity to change it. And we have to take that window of opportunity, and we can't afford to miss it. And we're speaking directly to you who represent this area of the city.
Thank you.
And we expect you to be our champions more than anybody else. You have to carry the ball to the city and explain to the city what's missing from that, from what they consider to be a community benefits agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Watson.
Councilor Mammal, you had a question.
I remember when the discussion had first taken place with community development agreement, and it was a must back then. What is the difference from the discussion we had back then and now? Are you suggesting that nobody's talking to you at all about this?
Well, we're glad that the conversation is ongoing, and we're glad that there's actually reference to a community benefits agreement in the documents that you have before you today. And those are positives. We're not saying that that's not a positive thing. But what we're saying is that the process hasn't been completed. When I was at a community consultation only a few weeks ago at the Rexdale Hub, and I saw a document presented to us. And the difference between the issues that we laid out as the community benefit and what the city proposed was vast.
Okay, so I can see, first of all, I do agree with you, and I'm one of those guys that will be looking for an agreement when it comes to jobs, local jobs, because there's no excuse for this at all, and we must look at. And my colleagues are shaking their head, but I think that's a must. I think addiction issues are a must, and I think we need to do more on-site with any addicts and help them as best we can. So that for me is a must. The only difficulty I'm seeing here is that when these kinds of things arise, and then the community says, well, this is us,
Question.
right? What's us? Is every single group, every single tenant organization, every single social network organization has to be at the table in order to negotiate this thing? Because if that's the case, it's never going to get negotiated.
Question.
Is there one?
Okay, he's going to ask a question.
See, the more you interrupt, the
Question,
worse it
Councilor
is.
Mammalidi.
Right? Like
Your
it's just,
question.
you know,
Question.
just the worse it is, though, right?
Question.
So my point is there one or two groups that really represent the voice of the whole community that can be seen as that negotiator?
Well, that's a good question. It's a fair question. That's why the Community Benefits Network has come together to try to give some kind of coherency to all the demands that are being expressed by different elements in the community. And as I said, the CBN, the Community Benefits Network, includes in itself 80 different community organizations. But with all due respect, I wouldn't want to see somebody excluded who also has something important to say that hasn't necessarily been part of the CBN. So I wouldn't, without thinking, want to exclude anybody else. But with all due respect, the community partners, social organizations, social groups, as you call them, should be at least given the same respect that's usually given to corporations. That's usually given to corporations. When companies and corporations have something to say, they have all the time in the world to be heard.
I don't necessarily dispute that, and I'm for one will be a voice for exactly what you're talking about. I just know that in these circumstances, you're going to get everybody under the sun wanting funding for their own reasons under this agreement. And much of those reasons are for salaries and for areas that have nothing to do with what we're talking about. And I know that that's going to happen. In fact, I'd be willing to bet some people that are here today are going to be championing their own cause and looking for funding for their own organizations through this. We got to read through that. And the only way you can do that is to come up with credible people in the community that are going to be those negotiators and that can read through that too, right?
And I think we've done that. I
Okay.
think we've done that through the CBN. Okay? And with all due respect, sir, we really are not here championing our own personal interests.
I think some will.
We are not.
Okay.
We are not.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker, Michele Francis. Good afternoon, Ms. Francis, welcome. You want to pull that mic down, and welcome, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, my name is Michele Francis. I am with the Toronto Community Benefits Network. I believe strongly that good planning informs great community. While the Toronto Community Benefits Network often shows benefits flowing through social conditions, the Woodbine Racetrack redevelopment is a good example of how planning really should be equally considered when it comes to community benefits. In some ways, the most important aspects of community benefits, targets, enforcement mechanisms, and an open dialogue with the community are just as important as planning. We can look at examples within the city, for example, like the Up Express. When it was first built, terrible planning. With help from the community, it actually became something that is quite successful today. I have 3 concerns with the planning report. One is an overall lack of vision, clear vision. 1, no transit improvements. And 3, no real plans for the inclusion of public space. Canadian cities fell hard to the lure of bad planning that happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and this type of planning was adopted all over North America and Europe. The notion of an event venue somehow existing outside of the community around it is a dated notion, and at worst, it's a recipe for future issues like disenfranchised citizens. At best, maybe congestion problems down the road. I suggest that the Great Canadian Gaming Company needs to consider some of these failures and bring their ideas into the 21st century. Not only are the failures of post-war planning recognizable around the city, but the people of Rexdale are actually going to be your neighbors. They're not only going to be your neighbors, they're going to be your employees, and chances are most likely they are going to be among some of your best customers. So why not out of the gates bring them into the development? Okay, so let's plan to make this something modern, something interesting, something that no other casino complex in North America is currently offering. Instead of being vague about the vision in the official plan and yet publicly promoting the plan as a city within a city, why not forget about that and strengthen the pre-existing barriers by building bridges? For example, Highway 27, it's a barrier. It's already a barrier. Why not modify that so that the community can be part of this development right out of the gates? Let's plant our feet firmly in the present era of modern city building, where you can move through the urban space around you, comforted in the ebb and flow of the community. Even when you're alone in this environment, you're never really on your own. Public transit, another big issue. There's no reason why Toronto gamblers will not want to use public transit to get to the casino. Gamblers, high rollers especially, from Toronto, live in some of the best transit parts of our neighborhood. There's a ribbon of development along the Toronto subway that where some of the real estate is valued at some of the highest values in the whole country. So if we're planning on improvements around transit, why not think about your high rollers as well as your workers? bike infrastructure. There are, I think we mentioned somewhere in the plan you mentioned racks for cycling. However, immediately around the racetrack, there's almost no cycling infrastructure. However, there's the possibility exists to actually build good bike infrastructure. There's lots of space around the future development. There are existing bike paths not far from the existing development. So why not include that in the plan to make it part of the development right out of the gates? And then the final concern is public space. The plan delivered on March 21st included a vague reference to public space possibly being included down the road, phase 2 of the plan, I think it was. Phase 1, I think it's the first 5 years of the plan. No talk of public space. It's completely front-end loaded with revenue generating space.
Can you wrap up, please? Your time's up. Can you wrap up?
For the casino. However, I see no reason why you couldn't include public space right out of the gates again, to again bring the community into the complex right from the beginning.
Thank you. I have a question by Councillor Ford.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Michele, for your deputation. So you made a lot of great comments about this development and what's before us. One of the things you mentioned is the transit investments. Are you aware that, still premature, but with an investment such as this casino and what comes with it, the retail and the hotels and the entertainment venues, that would leverage the city's ability to expand transit in a number of ways, including a possible expansion of the Finch LRT?
I still see no reason why it couldn't be part of the plan from the beginning.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Hawley, the question.
Thank you for speaking to us. I just took some notes about a few of the things that you talked about. One of the things you mentioned was 27 Highway. Could you elaborate a bit more on what your thoughts were on that? You just said, you'd like to see some modifications, but could you help me understand what you're thinking?
Yeah, so if that road is modified so that it's less of a barrier to access from the people on the, I guess it would be the eastern side of Highway 27. Right. It would just be something simpler for people to access, so that eventually, with the build out of this complex, instead of it being a city within a city, it's actually part of the Rexdale community. So that building can be seamless and it can blend into the community. So you can imagine, maybe going to a roti shop, and then going down Woodbine Lane and going to check out the horse circle and watching the horses. So could be something that you just do in your day-to-day activity.
So, but what do you mean though? But modify or change the barrier? Like I know the intersection well, and is it narrow the road or put a bridge or
put bike paths around it? Does it really need to be 3 lanes of traffic there? Like, couldn't it be narrower?
27 Highway? You wanted to narrow 27, is that what you meant by narrow?
You don't even need to narrow it. There's like so much room on either side of it. It could be part of the original plan, like we're gonna build a bike path on one side of it.
Okay, no, I think I understand a bit better. And then just the general vision about connecting to the community, could you extrapolate that a little bit further? So you talked about that major highway. I mean, I get it, 27 Highway it's a big space, a lot of cars. How else would you join the site to the surrounding community?
Well, it's just even now, what exists there now. It's that old-fashioned, this massive parking lot in front of the complex on Rexdale Boulevard. Like, why not instead build amenities right out, public amenities? Why not make them public amenities? Build them right out to Rexdale Boulevard so that the community that's already there on the other side of Rexdale can use public amenities as part of the community. That would, so that, again, the complex just blends in seamlessly to the rest of the community.
What do you mean by public amenity?
It could be public space, it could be mixed-use commercial. Some of the plans that they actually already have in there. Yeah. Why not bring that closer to Rexdale Boulevard? So it can actually start from the beginning. It could be part of the community.
Okay. And the last question: would you agree or disagree that the plan of subdivision, so taking that 50s and 60s parking lot and dividing it into something with roadways, public roadways and streets and so on, is headed in the direction of what you've been talking about? Or is it heading away? I don't know.
I worry that it's heading away. I worry that it's heading away based on the city within a city concept.
Thank you.
This is Rexdale, after all.
Got it. Thank you.
Councillor Mamalidi, a question.
There's a part of your deputation I absolutely agree with, and that is that the whole community should be taken into account in long-term planning. Would you be suggesting a secondary vision in the community outside of what's happening now?
I want to see a vision. I want to see some vision. There's no vision right now.
So-
So it's not even a matter of a secondary vision. It's a primary vision. All we hear is publicly talking about the city within a city, but in the plan, there is no real
No, but
vision.
you just can't, willy-nilly, you just can't say, well, we're going to build a bicycle path today, and we're going to build a park tomorrow, especially in that area outside of the jurisdiction we're talking about. That's what you're talking about, east of 27, all that. It means zoning changes. What you're talking about means a substantial amount of work was rezoning the whole community.
Well, they've had 10 years.
So that, well, okay, so we're here today, but at the end of the day, is that what you're talking, what you would be favoring?
I would say a primary plan.
A look at the rest of the community to see whether or not a rezoning in that whole community in the way of a much larger plan change would be in order?
As part of a primary vision, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Peter DeGama. Mr. DeGama. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. You have 5 minutes, my friend.
Thank you, councillors, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Peter DeGama. I'm a resident of Etobicoke North, Ward 1, and a member of the Acorn Etobicoke chapter on whose behalf I speak today. And Acorn is a coalition partner of Toronto Community Benefits Network. Acorn is an organization that has a commitment to fighting for economic and social rights of low and middle income residents. We have conducted campaigns such as Fight for Landlord Licensing, bringing real rent controls against predatory lending, and for affordable childcare. We have joined with TCBN to win a comprehensive benefits agreement, a CBA. And we want this agreement to include hard targets, a mechanism for monitoring progress, and TCBN as a third party representing the community to negotiate a CBA with the city, Woodbine Entertainment Group, Great Canadian Gaming, and Brookfield Partners in this development that's before today, the expanded gaming and entertainment facilities on Woodbine lands. As the staff gave a good report on the presentation, I was very heartened to hear that the CBA is a requirement for the project going forward. However, it's not defined how we arrive, as the previous speaker noted, how we arrive with the CBA. I just want to talk to you about what Acorn has learned through its campaigns citywide, trying to get CBA for constructions such as LRT and waterfront development. Acorn has learned that from the United States and elsewhere that a genuine CBA is a process that is undertaken not to accelerate revenue and profit building, but to build an inclusive community. And this includes, some of the elements include a signed, legally enforceable agreement, having clear monitoring and enforcement mechanism. It's specific to a project, in this case the gaming facility. It is inclusive, collaborative, and accountable, leveraging the development project to achieve policy objectives such as goals outlined in the Toronto Poverty Reduction Strategy, objectives such as local economic development and environmental sustainability. It details specific benefits the community will receive from a project and a timeline to achieve those benefits. And throughout, there's substantial community involvement in all phases of the CBA. It is in this that Acorn joins with TCBN in calling for setting of hard targets, monitoring mechanisms enforced by the community, and enlisting TCBN is a third-party community partner to work with the community in negotiating a CBA. And we can work with others in the community, not just TCBN, other community agencies, with the city and Woodbine Lands, developers, Great Canadian Gaming, and Brookfield Partners. The planning recommendations, if accepted as is, will lead to gaming and entertainment enclave, an inward-facing development without ties to the community. In order to avoid these dangers, and even planning staff foresee some of these dangers, it is imperative for a comprehensive CBA that actively seeks input from the community. As a member of the ACORN and TCBN steering committee, we did put forward comprehensive proposals to Great Canadian Gaming and to councillors. Those ideas are not within the proposal. I'll speak to some that relate to this report. As I've mentioned and previous speakers have said, that in the rush to get the gaming facility online, no concerted effort or vision has been presented to blend in with the community. The design of the casino promotes isolation from the community by not making specific provisions for roads and public space that integrate within the surrounding community. ECBN's proposals, supported by ACORN, address this situation by calling for concurrent development of public spaces and a road network that blend in with the community, and for arts and cultural spaces. It calls for the community use of facilities within the entertainment district for community events such as festivals, and another shortcoming is the lack of transit planning. The parties have not engaged in discussions with Metrolinx, TDC and province to ensure that the future connectivity of Finch West LRT and the UP Express is funded and timelines for construction set. Without this future transit planning to service the site, cannot be relied on. The current plan in the report cannot be relied upon. The proposal put forward by TCBN and supported by ACORN further advances the goal of the Toronto Poverty Reduction Strategy by calling for access to good jobs and securing local hiring targets as part of the Community Benefits Agreement. We're calling for a local hiring target of...
Please wrap up, sir. Your time is up. Your time is up. Okay, thank you. Questions? Councilor Nunziata?
Yes, so I've heard more than once about transit. Now, you are aware in the report that there is a plan, and Metrolinx is currently preparing a business case and working with GO and the Up Express on a stop at Woodbine, a GO stop, and as well as an Up Express. That was always the plan when they built the Up Express through my ward, that there would be a stop in Woodbine. So are you aware that this is ongoing and that they are having discussions and that is part of the plan? It's on page 26. It is. I know it was part of the plan 5 years ago when they put it through my ward, and I know it's part of the plan for Woodbine, and it's on page 26 of the report.
It is, but there's no there's no commitment to saying that it will be developed. I mean, are they going to develop a bus stop, or stop the LRT is going to come? There's no funding commitment.
Well, the thing is that they're bringing forward a business case, and then the funding, it would be the provincial members of parliament to the province to secure the funding, just like we did with the other lines that are going through. I got a stop along my line, and it's because we advocate to the province to get the funding to put a stop there. So it is part of the report, and it's ongoing dialogue that Metrolinx is having. So I just want you to know that. It is in the plan.
I hope that's the case, because the situation I wouldn't want to see is, for example, along the waterfront. I mean, there's a lot of development going on, condo development, and there's no significant transportation improvements along the waterfront. So I hope...
Yeah, I think that the province needs to be lobbied, but I think for Woodbine, to expand transit at Woodbine for a GO and Up Express would be very profitable, and that they would find the funds for it, because you're literally talking about thousands of ridership a day. So I think that we should be very confident that's going to happen.
That was
I
not a
hope you're
question.
right, but
Okay, that wasn't a question. Deputy Mayor Holliday, the question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for speaking to us. So for the second time now, I've heard this idea about a vision come up, about blending in with the community. I need to understand that. Like the plan of subdivision is here and now. It's before us. Can you give me a specific example of what you're looking for with respect to blending in with the community?
Well, some of the proposals we put forward and things that were referenced, like highlighted a couple of them, local hiring targets. Others mentioned public space. All this was part of a vision, what the community wanted to see. They wanted to see some of the revenues that flow from this project coming back to the community. Community endowment funds,
Okay.
community facilities, public facilities that were.
What does that have to do with the plan of
use.
subdivision?
And scholarships were mentioned, and these are part of a very comprehensive proposal that we gave to Canadian Gaming. And we were supposed to have a meeting, and in the end, they didn't meet with us. The council, we presented this to the councillor, Ward 2, Michael Ford, and we want to see that reflected in the plan. And the only way we can reflect it in this plan is if we have a TCBN, a negotiating partner, and the community, we are very familiar with TCBN. I'm a member of Acorn, but I also work with tenants associations within the community, and a part of a residents council that you meet monthly, and as a result, I meet with other people, and we've discussed
Thank
this
you.
plan.
So this is the draft plan of subdivision. Do we have to move any lines today? No. Because that's what's before us.
Yeah.
I hear all your stuff, but I got to get to the point with this.
Well, the staff report saying initially this thing was being held because certain conditions were met, and now they have a letter of intent. So they decided that it's going to be approved. So if I think in the alternative, it'd be held to address some of these concerns.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Robert Dragovic. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. Thank you for your patience. You have 5 minutes.
If you'll give me but a moment before you turn the clock on for the 5 minutes.
Reset it for you. How about that?
He's only unforgiving to some of us.
Oh, look, a draft plan of
Only
subdivision.
some.
He's only unforgiving to some.
Only some. That's right.
I noticed that a little earlier. My name's Robert Dragicevic. I'm with Walker Knott Dragicevic Associates. We're the planning consultants to the Woodbine Entertainment Group, and we are the consultants responsible for the filing of the 3 applications. I had a PowerPoint presentation, but I think Ms. Tom's presentation eclipsed much of what I was going to say, and I didn't want to be repetitive. But there is the one first message that I would like to bring to the community council, and that is an indication of the applicant's support to the staff recommendations. We understand them. We've been working with staff extensively for some period of time to try and resolve a lot of these matters, and the staff have put forward recommendations to you that have some requirements that have to be satisfied before the bills are brought forward. So the heavy lifting is still to occur in some respects with respect to the applications. The zoning applications, as were pointed out, are relatively straightforward. I think there's a paragraph in the planning staff report that you may have all read that this addition of the live gaming attribute to the zoning bylaw really has no land use compatibility issue associated with it. And what I wanted to do is just take you through the draft plan of subdivision. And this is a presentation on the fly, frankly, because I was listening very carefully to the other presenters. And there's a few things that have to be kept in mind when you look at the Woodbine lands. First of all, they're probably the largest single private ownership in the city of Toronto. This is about a 300-acre subdivision. There aren't many of them around other than Downsview that I know of in more recent times. It is a phased development of necessity given its scale. The introduction of the gaming attribute into the grandstand is really a building upon what has already been approved, and then as it extends into the gaming district. The colors are difficult to see up there, but fortunately you can see the arrows pointing to various parts, identifying the grandstand building, and then the gaming district to the, in this area here, in blue, and then the future development areas. I think what's important to recognize is that the draft plan of subdivision does one really important thing. It's actually quite a simple thing, but it's very significant. It introduces a road network. It introduces a road network onto a piece of property that has been somewhat removed from the remainder of the community. In fact, it is the road structure that will integrate this with the community. And my presentation had earlier been to focus on the integration of the Woodbine Square development with the gaming district. But in fact, this entire plan is built on a long-term expectation that this property will be bifurcated by public roads carrying services, and all of the roads within this plan of subdivision are unlike anything I've seen in my now 40 years of practice in the city. We have a 36-meter loop road extending between Highway 27 and Rexdale Boulevard. It is done and designed with a complete street strategy. It will manage transit, it will manage bike lanes, it will manage trees, it will manage pedestrians, and create that focus that's required. Similarly, all the connections out to Rexdale Boulevard are, by today's standards, oversized, given the nature of the development and the very strong interest in integrating this site into the community. It will be porous to the public. It'll be available to them and permeable. And that's the important consideration. So the things that have been referenced earlier about integration with the community, the primary integration element starts with the roads. It brings the transit. We've been working with all of the transit organizations, including Mississauga, York, TTC, and the like, all looking at what will be done to make this site have those forms of surface transit, and then augmented ultimately by an LRT, which is already in your plan to run down 27, and the final routing of that may change over time if there's an alternative that's superior to that. The matter of the draft plan also introduces the necessary services to bring these blocks to life. You need them. They also have other services associated with it, the stormwater management block. And one important element is a park block. And that park block is shown in the upper left below the yellow area of future residential. And that park block is a combination of all of the requirements for the subdivision land for the commercial, as well as the first 5%, I'll call it the first 5% of what would be future residential to the north. And this site has a significant constraint for residential development, and that is the noise contours from the airport. This entire plan is built around using up those areas most effectively for commercial development, and it also includes this park, which we are providing in excess of the commercial requirements at this point in time. It's set out in the conditions in your staff report.
Please wrap up, so you're out of time. Thank you.
I could wrap up by saying, again, we are supportive. The community benefits agreement, that's a matter that will be a requirement prior to the bills being brought forward. It will be dealt with at executive. In our view, this proposal is in a ready state. There are real proponents available to bring it to life. Woodbine is committed in its letter to the development of Woodbine Square. The timelines are set out, and we know that the gaming district has been long contemplated and will be advanced. It's a significant development, I believe, would deserve the support of the staff recommendations, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your maps, a little hard to see. You said that there's a gaming section, which I think is that sort of lighter blue, and then you said future development. I thought planning was asking you to do block 10, which is the gaming, and block 9, which I want to confirm what it is, concurrently. So that's not future development, that's
That's the now development, that's the phase 1 development area, yes.
So can you show me exactly where block 9 is?
Certainly.
Because I've got so many different maps, I'm not sure exactly what it covers. And what is actually in there?
Okay, if perhaps the lights could be turned on just a little bit, it might help to identify that for you, but essentially block 9 is this area in purple.
Right, but what is actually in there?
That's where the Woodbine Square complex development would take place. That's the development that would be on the west side of the southerly extension of Queen's Plate, and that would be opposite the casino area.
So that would include Woodbine Grandstand.
No, the grandstand is excluded from that. That's sitting just outside of it to the
Okay,
south.
so that's the red bit
Yes.
there. Okay,
Yeah,
so that would include what you're calling Woodbine Square with a walking ring.
Yes, that's block 9.
It would include performance venue.
The performance venue would be located in this area here. shown in blue.
Okay.
That's block 10.
And what about the Main Street retail? Where's that?
The Main Street retail would be along the Queens Plate extension, which would be a private road that it runs along the easterly limit of block 9 as it's presented there. And
So-
that would be the main entry point down to the grandstand, and on either side of it would have expressed the casino hotel operation on the east, and then the retail and other commercial on the west, which is the area that's committed to be developed by Woodbine.
So the Main Street retail is included with the Block 9, which is being built concurrently with Block 10.
And based on
I'll get there eventually.
and based on all the plans that have been produced to date, and some of them certainly are in their earlier stages, but there's indications within the casino block, for example, that there will be street fronting retail, and the expectation is that there will be street fronting retail in most of the blocks that are identified for commercial use over time.
And your bike lanes are going to reach that area?
And the bike lanes will reach into every area within the plan. They'll be on private roads or private systems designed like private roads, public roads to the south. And then on the public road system, it's a whole series of coordinated bike lanes that will carry from Highway 27 along that big loop road up to Humberwood. So that would along the fronting portion of the residential area.
So the bike lanes will actually go into your future residential area?
They will be, the roadways within the future residential area will likely have the connections out to those bike routes within the main subdivision.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Holly, the question.
So one of the things that I'd heard and I've been asking the community members about is the integration with the community. And I think I heard part of your response was the porosity of the site due to the addition of roads, I guess, that connect people in. Can you cite some other examples in the city or somewhere that we might be familiar with where this approach has been taken? A large site, roadways into it, and some sort of attraction. I'd like to get some comfort from you as an experienced planner that you could tell us about other places where this has worked. Something that brings people in there, that there's going to be life into the site.
Well, the life into the site is going to be derived by what's happening within the site, and this is going to be a very active area. I'm talking about in the plan in its entirety. This primary loop road that I've identified to you a couple of times is a very significant piece of infrastructure that will attract the type of uses along it and will place uses along it that have activities associated with commercial uses primarily. Those streets I challenged your departments on this. When was the last time you saw anyone build a 36-meter right-of-way in the city of Toronto? 36 meters. That's a huge street, and it can do a lot of things, and it can do a lot of things on its edges with effective conditions, large sidewalks, multi-use purpose, bike trails within the roads, tree planting. It's actually going to, for the first time I'll say it, it's going to be easy. It's normally in the city, your city's plan says you want public roads everywhere where there's a development, even on sites as small as 2 acres. This is 300. But we've not seen anything like this in the city in terms of the scale of roads and the integration. And there may be future roads in some of these blocks because the blocks themselves are so large. But to this point in time, this is the primary spine structure, as I call it, the ladder that brings all the services in, and the blocks may get broken up further later on. We just don't know at this point in time what might require that to take place.
Are there any other places around that you could give an example that you've taken? It may not be the precise approach where it's a complete green field, but you have redeveloped, or people have redeveloped the site to create an integrated mass that connects back to the community through all of those openings.
I would
and
think
you've subdivided inside, right, with different uses.
probably the best example is Downsview. It doesn't, but wouldn't have the extent of commercial development as this particular proposal would have included within it, in its ultimate form. But Downsview was really a field condition, and it now has major new roads running through it, which are the transit lines, and then the series of the hierarchy of local roads that serve into those areas.
Thank you. Councillor Mammoliti, the question.
So the difference between Downsview and your site is primarily, I mean, Downsview is a government-owned piece of land, right? Yours is private.
This is private, yes, sir.
So we're rezoning this entire property, and I've been supportive right from the beginning because I think it's needed. But one of the things I do agree with that we heard today, and we'll probably continue to hear, is how your particular vision on this site is going to change the rest of the community. And so has anybody talked to you, anybody from our staff, from any of the charrettes you're holding, any discussion about rezoning the rest of the community, or at least a vision of some sort, a secondary plan that you might be able to contribute to?
There is a requirement beyond this for more detailed plans to be prepared in the future residential areas of the site. It's a requirement that's there today. That's not part of this proposal. And as a matter of a correction, and with all due respect, this is not a rezoning of the entirety of the property. It's a rezoning of the area of the grandstand.
No, I get it.
And the gaming, only to add the one use, because the zoning that's on the property today has a significant range of uses. There's no need to
I'm
add
not talking
permissions.
about your site itself. I'm talking about, and you are changing substantially the site, and it's beneficial. But where the community's right is that it's only within your site that the changes occur. And the rest of the community needs to understand how this site is going to help the rest of the community. Has there been any discussion about your contribution to a study of some sort that talks about the changes on Highway 27, that talks about the changes of that industrial land that doesn't seem to be viable in many ways, and the potential rezoning of those sites for the rest of the community?
Well, I suppose I'd answer this in this manner. First off, those employment lands that are employment lands will not be rezoned for uses that are non-employment related, number one.
Well,
The residential
We don't
land.
know that. I'm asking whether or not anybody's talked about a future study that talks about the rest of the community. Because you're hearing the community saying, we need change, we get this, we get what you're doing, but what's happening to the rest of us? What's happening? And we shouldn't be ignoring that. I mean, they're saying to us there are problems on Highway 27, and the only way that's going to change is through private ventures. And the only way you're going to get that in the rest of the community is with some substantial change in the Planning Act. And the only way to do that is with a secondary plan or an avenue study or something like that. My question to you, has anybody talked to you about your contribution to such study?
I would have to say that that's been discussed in the context of the overall application. And what's been included with the application has been extensive review and consideration to transit and transportation requirements, which would be beneficial to the community. There has been significant discussion with the early introduction of a park to serve the community.
Where?
Pardon me?
Where?
That is.
Is that the open space that that's that green space in the top? So again, that's on your site?
Yes, sir. Okay. Yes, it's on the site, and it's it exceeds the requirement that would be required for the commercial development of the property. So there are elements of.
Maybe it's me and how I'm delivering my question. It's not about your site. It's about your contribution to the rest of the community and whether or not people have talked to you about the need for a study of some sort to bring the change that might be needed eventually. Nobody's talked to you about that in all of these discussions?
The discussions have been related to the overall development within it, and that would include considerations to integration with the community, not just a road system, the delivery of transit, the delivery of early parks that would be used principally by people who are in the area today. I think those are beneficial. Opening up the site in the manner that's suggested is going to be beneficial as another destination within the community.
Would Woodbine be in a position, if some of us wanted to move a motion to this regard, would Woodbine be in a position to help contribute to a study for the rest of the community so that you can help with the financial arrangements for that. What we're gonna hear from staff is we don't have the money for, City of Toronto doesn't have the money for the study.
Last question.
I don't think I could commit to that without asking my clients' interest in doing that at this particular point in time.
Councillor Ford, the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just trying to get an understanding. Look, the conversations on this development and where we have come to today have been happening for approximately 2 years since council endorsed this vision in principle. Is that correct?
Yes.
And has there been conversations with not only the councillor's office that I represent in our community, but Councillor Crisanti, city planning, on a lot of what deputants have said today, as well as my colleagues about transit expansion? Those conversations have happened, is that correct?
Yes.
We have a dedicated LRT, well, space for an LRT stop in these plans, correct?
The road systems have been designed to accept an LRT should it run through the site. Or if it was to be determined that it stays along the 27 frontage, it could manage that as well.
Right, but we have dedicated land to that.
There's sufficient land available for that type of facility, yes.
Right, we do have public space in the plan. Just to, one of the notions about connecting to the local community, and myself knowing the local community very well with the employment lands on the east, residential on the north, to that, are we going to be using, and have you spoken with city planning and particular transportation about how this site is going to integrate with Highway 27, Rexdale, as well as a possible entrance onto Humberwood and a traffic management plan?
Yeah, yes, sir. A traffic management plan is one of the requirements to be set out, and the road system here has been carefully assessed with respect to the locations of all those roadways, not just in terms of traffic flows, that's an important part, but again, pedestrian connectivity and movement into the site. And I'd mentioned before about the movement into the site with respect to the community enjoying the benefit of a park. The Woodbine Square has always been intended, that's as shown in the graphic up above, that will become something that is available to the community in a number of manners. And yes, it's private space, but it'll be activated like public space. So it'll have year-round use and availability. So the walking ring, as you see up there, is something for larger gatherings, community functions, and things like that.
Right, and Robert, just to be clear here, that there's many partners at the table, but you represent Woodbine Entertainment Group, correct?
Correct.
And then the other representative would be the casino portion, which is Great Canadian Brickfield.
Correct.
And they have their own plans around community benefit agreements and all that.
They're bringing forward their own development plan on the blocks that they've been that they're under contract with the Woodbine Entertainment Group. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think I got a quick question for you. So on condition number 3, the service provider development to include appropriate supportable levels of retail and other amenities. So has your client hired a retail consultant, and what kind of retail do we see going in there, and how's that going to affect the Woodbine Mall across the street?
Well, there's not been an impact study to consider that, and I'm sure you're aware that that's really not something that forms part of the policy considerations in the city's plan. If it's retail, it's going to be competitive with retail across the street and elsewhere. In terms of the types of uses, that's been an ongoing discussion. The site plan that's been developed for the Woodbine Square lands is one that has a whole series of modules, and it's all sized against modules to bring in a variety of users. But the expectation and the intended market is to bring it to restaurateurs, other entertainment type operations, retail functions, and there's mezzanine space that might even be at an early stage usable by independent offices, those sorts of things.
So we're looking mostly restaurants. That's what we're thinking.
I think that to be very clear about that. I would expect that particularly around the walking ring area and along the west side of what it would be Queen's Plate, that's the type of uses that would probably find favor with that type of environment. Very open patio areas, you know, that sort of thing that draw people down and through and down into the real activity areas around the main entrance to the, ultimately the main entrance to the casino and to the grandstand areas.
So what part do we undertake that you're gonna build this retail and we're gonna make sure it's not empty? What part of the process do we go and hire a retail consultant to say, you know, what will come here?
Well, I don't think it's, the we is my client,
Yeah.
no doubt. And I think that, you know, the onus is upon them. This is a private investment. They want to make it work. They want to make it function. They're quite confident at this point in time that what's been presented in Woodbine Square is a marketable commodity. I think, like with, as with many situations, the interest in a site may be dependent upon seeing shovels hit the ground. And I think, you know, we've talked about that in our internal meetings all the time. And I think that there's a lot of infrastructure to be installed here. And I think once that starts, the interest may well lift itself up. And, you know, it's incumbent upon them to fill that space.
Wait, question, Councilor Nunziata?
Yeah, sorry, I just had a question. So you are the agent for Woodbine, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I guess speaking to your client, I'm sure that, I mean, this is gonna be a long process. There's going to be a lot of input from the community meetings. So would you see that moving forward, there would be, as it progresses, that there would be a number of community meetings, maybe having working groups, some community members being involved through the whole process, and so they can give their input as you move along?
I could see that in part, but in particular with respect to the first phase, I think the consultation is going to be around the community benefits agreement and things
Right.
like that. They've committed to doing that, and I think that's part of it. As subsequent phases come on, particularly the residential, I think that, you know, they'll have to reach out and, you know, as Councillor Mamalidi asked me about, you know, is there a plan? There's a requirement to do another plan that will look at not only what goes inside there, but how it will integrate with the remainder of the community as well.
So that would be coordinated through the counselor and through the planning staff as you move along?
Certainly through the
Yeah.
counselor, he'll have involvement, whether there was a planning application involved or not, but there will be planning applications at a later
Yeah.
point, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, our next deputant, Abdul. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. Thank you for your patience.
No
My
problem.
friend, you
Thank
have
you
5
for having
minutes.
me. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Abdul Ado, and I have been a local resident for 17 years in the area. I was raised in the Rexdale area, attending elementary, middle school, and high school there. Still today, I'm there eating from the local restaurants, shopping from the local stores, and working with local community organizations. I've seen the neighborhood get worse over the years in terms of employment opportunities and crime rate. Youth are raising themselves in the streets, while parents, mostly single mothers, are working extensive number of hours at minimum wage with little or no job security. The lack of meaningful jobs opportunities has families barely sustaining living conditions. The youth who school wasn't for them are finding other means of providing for themselves, and this is usually in the streets where they are led down a road that they regret taking, and I can guarantee that from personal experience. While the ones who did attend college or university are drowning in student loan debts and are working minimum wage jobs with no career development in their field. And I was a prime example of that, working for 2 years at Montana's Cookhouse with an engineering degree. The cycle seems to repeat itself. A community failed by the system, who are desperate and in need of more opportunities. Developments like the Woodbine Casino can provide these opportunities with good jobs for residents in the area and neighborhood and environmental improvements. And so it's important to create recreational facilities and educational facilities so that the youth can have something to do instead of hanging out in the streets, and in this case, a casino, which I'm sure they will be. And there was nothing about that in this phase of the report, containing only entertainment and business developments. The youth will look to this development as an opportunity for them to develop a career for themselves and maybe even be able to afford to live and grow a family in the Rexdale area instead of moving away from the neighborhood due to lack of opportunities, and also look forward to having positive uses from the development. This is an opportunity to give the youth a chance to make something of their lives while enjoying the new facilities in their neighborhood and to earn an honest living where they can provide for themselves. I recently got a job working with the Toronto Community Benefits Network, and every day I get emails and phone calls from youth who are interested in career development opportunities in their neighborhoods. They want to work but just need more opportunities. It's important to hold the developer responsible so that opportunities are being followed up on. You all are making decisions for people who don't know nothing about the process of planning. So I ask you to make these decisions with remembrance of these local residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul. Questions? Seeing none? Deputy Mayor Holliday, question?
Thanks for speaking to us, but I think the gist of it is you're supportive of the changes that are proposed here. Do you think the youth would regard, if there was restaurants coming in like some of the speakers before us talked about, do you think the youth would see that as an opportunity as a place to work or to start a career?
Yes, exactly. I do think so. Maybe for the younger generation that are attending high school or are younger, are not ready for or have not thought about careers yet. I think it'd be important for them to actually be working instead of just hanging out after high school in the streets and doing whatever they do on a daily basis.
Or a place to make some money to pay the bills while you're going through school.
Exactly, or even help their parents to pay the bills, because I'm pretty sure their parents need support paying their bills.
Absolutely. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Abdul.
Yeah, no problem.
Our next deputy, Mustafa Abdi. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
My name is Mustafa Abdi. I am a resident of North Etobicoke. Have been for the last 25 years, from JK all the way to 12 Humber. So I stayed locally. And although, like, I had a whole bunch of stuff written down, to be honest, to talk about it, but the first speaker hit it on the nail. He talked about how people have been discriminated because of postal code. I applied for a job with 2 resumes, 2 addresses. I didn't get it with my Rexdale address. I got it with my auntie's address, who lives in Mississauga, and that's at the airport. He talked about people not getting that opportunity and having to go to Alberta. I went to Alberta. I'm a graduate at University of Guelph Humber, business degree, couldn't find a job, went out west, got into the construction field. Came back understanding, okay, you know what? There's more to life than just working in the office. There's construction opportunities. Now, when I was in university, we were talking about this Woodbine development 10 years ago. And they told us, oh, there's going to be a whole bunch of jobs coming. I was excited. Nothing came from it. As the councillor talked about secondary planning and stuff like that, we've had various consultations in the community. And a number of residents have said that, I live at Queens Plate right now, currently, actually. And we had a consultation right there. And a mother came and she said, she's been living there for how long? She has kids. Not one of them is working at Woodbine Mall. She went to her local bank there and asked everybody there who was working. Not one is a resident of Rexdale. So when everybody talks about community benefit agreements and making sure that there are set targets, this is why. And I know we're talking about planning, but even with the planning stage, there's talking about stage 2, there's going to be, we're going to look into a park or some sort of city space, a community space. I mean, I've ran basketball programs and had to move from school to school to school because I couldn't afford the permit space for young youth to try and keep them off the streets. For Abdul even, he ran in a couple of my programs, but every time we have to stop them. So now they talk about the space, but is there any commitment to that space? Are they, I know it's in phase 2, but why can't we put commitments to it right now in phase 1? So I'm here just to basically talk about that, and also to go into, just to give you my day job here, I work as a vocational instructor at a pre-apprenticeship program, TradeLinks. And we have, because everybody talks about, well, if we set targets, we're not going to have enough people to employ. Well, I can tell you from personal experience, I have a bunch of guys and girls ready to go to work, trained, certified, right? So if we don't have the needs of the community, if they're not voiced, and the only way that can happen is from people who talk to the community. I lived there. I said I haven't been. No one consulted me on anything really. We had one consultation, but we have members who are organizing in the community, talking to residents, asking them what their needs are. The TCBN is a great example. If they're not at the table, how do I know my voice as a resident is being expressed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. See no questions. Thank you for, question, Councilor Nunziata?
So, you know, I agree with you, but have you tried to reach out to the local councillor and that you want to get involved and you want to be part of the process so you can give your input?
Yes, me and Michael have had, along with other community members, we talked about giving our input. But
So,
we
so
want to
you
see,
are working.
we are working, but we would like to see, and Councilor Vince Karasati, we've been talking for the last year and a half. However, talking is talking, right? But if we don't have someone at the table to express our needs, it's only going to be a nice little meeting.
Well, I'm sure your councillor will express that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ford?
Thank you, and thank you, Mustafa, for showing up. I think, if I may, for 1 second, I think you're an incredible voice in our community. Having said that, I think what you said about community dialogue is very important. Do you believe that we need to do more community dialogue going into this?
I believe so, because if I've seen on the first report that is stated now, they talk about future plans. What are those future plans? They talk about a park. Is there a commitment to a park? We have some ideas.
Absolutely.
Why didn't they talk to other people? It's not just me, but there are a whole bunch of people in the community.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Holliday?
Thank you for speaking to us today. And I take your point and the others that have spoken about how the community benefits will work with the community in the process to arrive at that. We're not really focused on that today with the report. We're really looking at the plan of subdivision and the form. And I just want to confirm that you're supportive and that we are heading the right way. So you're supporting us to continue along with this development as we see it before us today.
I'm supportive of it.
Okay.
However, it's got to include a community voice at the table.
Right.
If that community voice is not at the table, like I said, there are a vast minority of opportunities available with this potential development. But if it's not done right, it won't see.
It's in front of us now, though, in terms of the shape and the blocks and the roads. Is there any concerns that you've got about that part about it right now?
Other than the so-called future developments or phase 2, I don't see any commitments into phase 2 because we're talking about parks and stuff like that. What about a community center? I don't see any commitments, so why not add some of those commitments now? We're talking the future. Yeah, we can plan for about it later, but not why not at least say we are committed to building this.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you. Mustafa, that's not a Cleveland hat, is it? That was my question. Okay, our next, Ann McCrae. Good afternoon, Ann. Welcome.
Good afternoon. You're very patient people. My name is Ann McCrae. I'm the Director of Legal Services at Rexdale Community Legal Clinic, which is in the Rexdale Hub. I'm not here as the clinic director today. I'm here as the chair of the community board, which manages the Rexdale Community Hub. And on behalf of the director, Amra Munawar, many of you know Amra, I'm dispatched to make sure you realize that there's a severe shortage of community space in Etobicoke. The demand far exceeds the supply. There are 60 organizations climbing all over each other for the community spaces that are available in the hub. And there are other organizations that can't find a space. I'm talking about every activity from tutoring to language classes, cups and brownies, badminton, indoor soccer, chess clubs, you get the idea. So these organizations are clamoring for space. As far as I know, we're the only hub in Etobicoke in the foreseeable short-term future. Maybe, well, some of you are involved in other efforts, but at any event, how does this relate to what we're here about today? So 60 years ago in this council room, you would have been negotiating with developers, leaning on them to develop their residential developments and to put aside 5% or some percentage for a house of worship space and a park, and maybe to put a playground in the park. Maybe you would have done that. So we have in the plan that you've seen on the screen, there is a park. But what we need in community space is not just an outdoor space. I want to think about this in terms of indoor space too. If there was 2 to 5% of the square footage of the project that's on the map there, the indoor space was nonprofit space, that would be the indoor equivalent of having that park. And it would enable the community to create these spaces that make a specific purpose facility into a multi-purpose facility. For example, Woodbine Entertainment Group has told us about making an entertainment venue. So they're undoubtedly going to have a big stage, probably a small stage. If they incorporated community space and built enough club rooms around those two spaces, then the commercial venues, both large and small, could be double purpose for community theaters to have a storage room for their props. You could have Humber College jazz musicians could have a place where they could have a performance venue or a practice venue. You could have a community marching band. Burlington is very proud of its 2 or 3 marching bands. That works for them because they've got a community space that dedicates a storage room for the storage of band instruments and uniforms. If you don't have those community spaces available, then having the park, it's like having a park with no field house. Where are you going to put the practice equipment? Where are you going to put the uniforms? Where are you going to put the showers if you don't have a field house? So I'm saying the comparable thing for indoor community space is you've got this facility being built with the lights and sound system for an entertainment venue. 5% of the space set aside for the community space enables your community theater group to have a little home cupboard that they unpack and they do their thing and then they get out of the way and the commercial entertainment thing happens. So it's not just that, but I'm just using that as an illustration of what community space looks like inside of a large commercial development, and that it just takes a little foresight and asking the architects to incorporate that into the floor plan. And I think that doesn't require moving any roads or any lines on this thing you saw on the screen. It involves a principle. And that kind of principle can be rolled into a community benefits agreement. That's what I see as the long term. The short term in the building phase, that's when you get what Mustafa talked about in the hiring of trades, the training of trades. But if you build it in over the long term use of the facility, Humber College can run training programs here. Link can run English classes for the hotel and restaurant staff that are not good with English. Humber College could run other programs in partnership with the community space in the organization. I see that I'm talking too fast. I should have slowed down to talk out my 5 minutes, give you time to hear. But I didn't do that, so maybe I'll stop there and see if you're following my train of thought.
Question, Councillor Doucette?
Thank you very much, and no, you spoke beautifully. I can tell the passion in your voice. So I know that future, I understand there's going to be a campus built on this property, but that is future. So you're wanting them to think about it in their first phase, right? While we're building the gambling areas, the gaming areas, and we're building the Woodbine Square. You're wanting us to do it now rather than later, where we could actually add more community space later. Is that what I'm hearing?
What kind of assurance do I have that that next step and the step after that will actually be done? That's why I want you to put it in now. I want you to require it at every phase. And if they want to trade it away and move it over to the campus area, once they've got it, once the first phase is mature and they start putting the shovels in the dirt for the second phase, then good, they can move it over and it will, and the whatever percentage you put down, you know, the square foot percentage that you name is going to be dependent on, is it, you know, a highly priced commercial space, or is it an extra floor in the hotel that it provides extra meeting rooms and classrooms? But they can deal with that. It's part of their plan, and they can move it over to the campus later. But if it never gets built, you've never had it for the community.
Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor Holliday?
Thank you for speaking to us. I think the first time I met you, but at least spoke to you, was at a panel discussion about
hubs, yes.
And one of the lessons out of that was it was very difficult to get down on paper what the vision of people were. And you've given us something today. I guess the struggle that we've got is moving from the abstract to the concrete, because we're at that point. Could you help articulate any more ideas, more in the direction of concrete? And you started with the stage and some rooms, but could you help illustrate a bit better what you see as a physical community function in there? It's not a community center. I don't think you went that far. But
no, I don't think you need
can
to
you give us
design a
bit
hub
more?
to fit into the, wouldn't that be great if we could? But, you know, let's just make the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors of the hotel into a community hub. But I don't think that would sell. So that's why I'm suggesting there's a number of, I tried to illustrate with things that are easily imaginable, because we may have been involved ourselves in community organizations or sports teams that just need a room to put stuff in. And the Cubs and Brownies can't use a room at the hub, practically speaking, unless we can give them a locker to put stuff in too. So you want to think about it in terms of multifunction facilities, and from everything from classroom size to meeting room size to small storage locker size that forms all part of that 5% that you set aside for nonprofit space. And then you figure out, maybe there's a formula that can work out, because some of the spaces are going to be very valuable to the landlord, to Woodbine Entertainment Group during the evening. But during the daytime, not so much. There's going to be room for seniors yoga classes. And they could have their nonprofit band of time across the calendar, in the morning until 2 o'clock or whenever. Then they can have classroom time during that time as well. And then they can make their buck on it from 5 till 2 a.m.
So how do we get that on paper fast?
Through the community benefits agreement that
But are there, and sorry to interrupt, but are there people ready to talk about the bricks and the mortar and the square feet and the use right now? I don't want an abstract group. sort
No,
of
I'd need
saying-
at least 45 minutes to pull the team together.
No, but okay, but point taken. So there are people that could literally say, my group needs a room of X size, and here's my calendar of event. I think it needs to be to that level of.
The Rexdale Community Hub can give an outline of what kind of organizations use our building, and it would translate into what is needed. And the people that we deny service to because we just don't have the space for them, there's not enough church basements, right?
Yep.
And we don't have the use of schools. It's security risk to open up a school anymore, which used to be where the community went for all these types of things. So there is a way to get a catalog of what's needed, I think, and we could do it. We could pull it together fairly quickly. But we're part of the Community Benefits Network, and so we're willing to work with them on this. I think they're more urgently focused on trades needs for the construction phase, but we do have more than 45 minutes to work out the details of what my proposal, how that fits in with the rest.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann. Councilor Mamaleed, a question?
I'm sorry, so nobody's talked to you at all about community space on the site?
We mention it whenever we can, the possibility that there needs to be, place for Rexdale Community Health to have a satellite, things like that eventually, but no, it hasn't been specifically discussed.
So community center space has not been talked about?
I think I would know if it
I'm talking
had.
about a community center. None of that has been talked about? So there hasn't been any exchange with respect to actually bricks and mortar on the site that could be converted to community space?
If I thought that had happened, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you.
And how do you feel about a secondary plan kind of being brought forward for the rest of the community? So you talk about all of the lands around this site and the future of those lands as we might see them. Do you think that might be needed at this particular time?
Are we talking about what Woodbine Entertainment Group proposes to do in its next stages of development?
No, I'm talking about Woodbine Entertainment contributing to something that would bring a plan forward that would talk about the need for zoning change and the need for use of land in the future around this site.
I'm always hesitant to know how you're going to control what happens in the future. I think we have this project in front of us to try to control at the moment.
Well, we heard earlier that people weren't sure what was going to happen east of Highway 27, and we've heard about the mall, and we've heard about future uses of land just north of this site, what that might bring. What I envision is this thing going through, and for those of you that are wondering whether I support it, I do. But I also support the community's efforts in bringing forward a substantial plan that talks about the future. And so, for me, my question is, should we not be looking at the future of Rexdale in that area and what that land's going to look like? Otherwise, all you're going to get is separate applications for rezonings over the next 25 years, And the councilors are gonna go crazy trying to figure out how to either agree with those rezonings, whether they're apartments or condos or commercial space, or whether to approve them. And isn't it better to have a plan laid out that talks about all the land around this site in 30 years and 40 years and what that might mean, so that everybody here can get their questions answered? What all of you are looking to do, you could say yes or no to this, is to try to squeeze in your needs for the community on this particular development, on this particular site. Wouldn't it make more sense if you knew that something else was happening in a much larger community, knowing that you would get your community space out of that as well?
To say yes to that, I would have to have confidence that a community plan, that no matter how hard city planners try to form a community plan, development, it seems to me, is profit-driven by the owner of the property. And that is what ultimately drives it, not what city planners have thought would be ideal in the situation. So no, I don't have confidence that we could make a grand plan that would protect us in the future unless we put the conditions on this part of this development while we can.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I didn't mean to denigrate the efforts of city planners. I know you do your best, but then there's the Ontario Municipal Board.
Thank you, Ann. Next speaker, Kumsa Baker. Ms. Baker. Hello, welcome. Thank you for your patience. You have 5 minutes.
Cool, good afternoon. My name is Kumsa Baker, and I work with the Toronto Community Benefits Network, and I'm here to depute on this Woodbine Casino expansion. I just wanted to start with sort of where sort of some of the things that the community has been talking about in terms of community spaces and community integration. As you all know, in 2007, there was a development proposal for a casino by Cordish Entertainment that ended up failing. Unfortunately, the community was involved in that organizing process through Community Organizing for Responsible Development, which a lot of those members are here today. And I think sort of the expectations of where the community sort of saw this development initially with the news reports of $1 billion coming to this area, that there would be some portion of the area, or at least of this development, that would be sort of contributed to the community, whether it be in a park, whether it be in an educational facility, or whether it be in a sports and recreational facility. And sort of as we've seen the sort of planning recommendations come a couple weeks ago, it's sort of been hard for, especially for local residents that don't understand the planning process or haven't engaged in this process to date. And sort of talking about that, and when we see what was actually proposed by this developer, it really is the bare minimum if you really think about it, because there's been comments by the design review panel around specifically some of the things that the community residents have raised today, and around the integration of this development with the local community. And those comments have been made by the design review panel that's supposed to be hearing from the developer again in May. So that's one thing, and I think one of the reasons for that too, like Councillor Mamalidi mentioned, around a secondary plan and the lack of an overall vision of the whole area. To date, there's been 37 secondary plans across the city. Many of these plans are for areas that are much smaller than this sort of proposed development, and due to this lack of, I guess, sort of vision of the whole area, it's very centered to this sort of private development. When folks talk about a park, it's not about just a park, committing to a park through a letter. It's about actually committing in this phase, at least, to a park. We see in this initial phase one a lot of business development, a lot of revenue generating development, but not actually anything specific to the community. Any community sort of development is sort of to later phases that are not up for discussion today, which is another concern. Another thing I also wanted to talk about was the lack of consultation with the local area. So to date, we have yet to sort of see any representatives from the developer actually being in the local community and hearing from local residents' needs. I know we had discussions with city council and city staff around what Toronto community benefits and what the community would like as part of community benefits, but in terms of any sort of consultation around community spaces has been very limited, other than the consultation that we did have on March 21st. And I think I'll sort of, and I think one of the concerns of why we raise these concerns is that through what we've seen in other developments across the U.S., where you see casinos go up, but then all the other promised development that the developer puts forward is never seen in the future, and that's created a lot of devastation to communities. If you look at Atlantic City, and the devastation that the casinos have had to the local community, and where we see Atlantic City today, is due mainly to that reason, is that there hasn't been other aspects of development to sort of bring in that community integration instead of just being a casino with nothing around it. So just for the ask would be to definitely look at community space and community integration as part of this development, because we see like even things like bike lanes. So like, yeah, it's great to have bicycle racks, but is there proper infrastructure of bike lanes around the area to facilitate for people to bike to the area? And I think that those sort of questions still need to be sort of thought about. I think also the planning process is a bit rushed as well. The staff
Please wrap up, sir. You're out of time.
in the planning report have made comments around proposals having to be resubmitted, which is another concern for the community as well.
Thank you, sir. Questions? Councilor Nunziata had a question.
Okay, you just touched on bike lanes, so I don't know if you were here when we asked the agent for the applicant. Yes, there's bike lanes. I don't know if maybe you weren't here when he spoke about it?
So like bike lanes as in facilitating bike lanes to the area, or just
yes,
specifically?
No, through the area, he talked about it. But I just want to make it, just so you understand, and if everybody that's here understands what we're doing here today, and if it's your understanding, we're here just to discuss the planning report that we have before us. The community benefits and all the community space, community centers, and whatever that we want to add onto that will be on a separate report that will be going through executive and council. So today is just the planning report that we have before us. Community benefits, actually, absolutely. So there will be an opportunity for the community to work with the local councillor, work with the city, and talk about all these community benefits that you would like to see as part of the project. So are you aware of that?
Yes, I am aware of that, but when we talk about community benefits, we're not only talking about local hiring and good jobs and procurement, we're also talking about actual community input into the development.
Yes,
and
that's what I'm talking
that has yet
about.
to happen.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay. Councillor Ford, a question.
Thank you. So you are aware of the community meetings that have taken place?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
You did make a statement that the casino operators were not in attendance at those meetings. Are you aware that they were in attendance and they have been at all community meetings?
Yeah, but also they have been, but they did not make any comments at the meeting, and I don't know if actual people in the room knew who were representing the actual developer. But when I talk about actual community or developer engagement in the local community, it's actual who's a point of contact that me as a resident can say, hey, you're the developer that's coming in, that's going to be operating this casino over the next 20 years. I want to ensure that I can have an open line of communication with the developer, whether it be through a sort of community coalition of a working group, or whether it be a steering committee, or some sort of facilitation of input from the community, not only currently but also for future, because we know the social economic impacts that and mental health impacts that this has on local communities. So when we talk about planning, when we talk about community benefits, we're talking about community health, right? And how all these aspects can sort of
be put together to actually create a successful development that the community wants to see, that the developer wants to see, and I'm sure all the city councilors want to see as well.
I just want to ask a question specifically to the community consultations and community input, because that's very important. Being the community representative for North Etobicoke, I think that's one of my number one responsibility, is to make sure the community is heard. Do you believe throughout this entire process that my office specifically has been an open door to the entire community as well as yourself, and listening to you and the concerns throughout this whole process?
Yes, your office has been really great in creating that open line of communication, but if you sort of look back to the first consultation at Humberwood Community Center on September 25th, I believe, there was tons of people at that community meeting that talked about they need to be at the table that you're at with the developer, because that's the only way that community can actually have a seat at the table, right? Because I'll just leave it at that, sir.
No, I understand where you're going. Yeah. The other question I have, because I do want to be clear, you said, so you are from the Child Community Benefits Network. Yeah. So not only at my office, but have you been able to meet with the city manager's office regarding this development?
Yes.
Yeah, so they've had an open door. They've taken, back a lot of notes that you have asked. How about SDFA and Chris Brillinger's team?
Yes.
Name also met with you.
Yes.
And other members of the community.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Question.
Thanks. Again, the same terms have come up a few times with the speakers, the same words actually, about concern over the overall vision, community spaces, and community integration. So we're at that point. I mean, you mentioned it. You think the community needs a voice. I mean, this is the public meeting. I've got the draft plan of subdivision in front of me. It's right here. Does anything need to change on this? This is the time to make the choice. And you've been critical about the connection with the community, but how do we change that? And the roads are here.
Yeah, I don't know if right here and right now is sort of the time to make sort of these critical changes. Is there a future meeting that we can defer this to?
The vote's coming in a few minutes. So if a line needs to move on the paper, I've yet to hear someone tell me that. I'm trying to be very respectful. I mean, a lot of people have come forward and made the same critical points, but I've never received, I've had very little sort of concrete explanation as to what they mean with depth. And I need to understand what connectivity to the community needs to change. I see a series of road networks that are public roads. So when you made the comment about integration with the community, and I'm looking at the physical subdivision, what do we need to know today?
So there's been a lot of, if you look at sort of the map of sort of what is currently proposed and what additional phases that are also part of the plan, the concept plan, the whole master vision, correct? And that includes sports and recreation facilities, the campus, and also other amenities like a public park. Why can't we put those phase 2 amenities as part of phase 1 and create one whole sort of integrated build out of this area, right? Because what right now is you see a casino coming up, you see the 2 hotels, you see the retail, you see the restaurants, but as a community resident, there's a public park there's going to be land for, but there's no actual specific thing saying that we're going to be putting a park. So we would want to see a park as part of phase 1, as part of this phase, an actual park.
Are you speaking on behalf of yourself or the network?
Of the network.
Okay, so the view of the network is this needs to be built all at once.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It's the first time someone I think has said that, to build it all at once. So I get it.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring this is because when we look at other jurisdictions and other casino developments, what we've seen is that the casino goes up and all the other things around it that's been planned by the developer, it doesn't end up happening, right? So we want to ensure, because now is the time that council has the ability to put in these parameters around this development, right? So we just want to ensure that community areas, we know it's going to be there, or potentially phased in other future developments. We want to ensure that they're here now
But
as
you're-
part of phase one. As
You're
what
clear
part of
that some of it's there now, like there's the casino and then there is some retail and commercial around it. And you understand that block 9 and 10 are in front of us now.
Yeah, but even
You
that's
want
not
more, okay, but you would prefer more.
exactly
Okay.
from the other phases, which is a park, a sports recreation facility, and the campus.
Thank you.
No worries.
Question, Councillor Grisanti.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Kunza, thank you for coming out. I think you already in part answered my question, so which would have been, so you've seen there's a comprehensive master plan for the whole site. You've seen it's been online, so I think you've seen that, right? So, and I've heard a couple of times already through the other deputations, and maybe I think even yours, that this is something that's been going on for 10 years. Well, you realize that it hasn't been going on for 10 years. 10 years ago was a concept called Woodbine Live that just wasn't the right time for that to happen for whatever reason. You recognize that, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So we're now at a point, and I think we're quite fortunate to be at this point where in 2015, because of the successful vote on council to move forward with the expansion of the casino. But I want to be clear, it's not just the casino. I totally agree with you. No one's interested in just moving forward and just having a bigger and better casino. But do you recognize that that is the catalyst? That is what will be driving forward and make all these things that we're talking about today become a reality.
Yes, yes, I do understand that, but also the thing is, what about this development is going to put us above and beyond the other developments, the other casinos, the other competitors, that the other destination sort of plans along the 401 of other casino.
And we hear that message loud and clear because it's always been, from my perspective, I know I think I can safely speak about all of us here, including Councillor Ford as well, that this is about jobs and creating jobs and making sure we're creating good jobs, and also paying very close attention to everything that everyone said here about community benefits and ensuring that not only happens borderline, but that happens in a very real way, and the jobs mean jobs for local people. That is what we're advocating for. I hope you recognize that because we've been saying that, and that's what we're pushing for.
Yeah, I totally understand that, and I thank you so much for your commitment to ensure that not only that there are local jobs, but that they're also good jobs. And I think the community definitely wants to see that, but it just in terms of, we want to see a bit more as a community, because the expectations of this development were sort of up here, and sort of when you've seen this proposal, like, communities like, what sort of use can I get out of that, right? How can I, you know what I mean? Like, other than a job, right? We know there's residential development, a lot more of that coming to the area as well, right? So we need to, what public spaces are there to facilitate for this large sort of residential
For
influx
that,
to the
I
area?
just want to refer you quickly to recommendation 18, which speaks to that more specifically about community benefits. If you can have a look at that, I don't want to take too much time.
Will do.
I'll mention it again after. And just one last point, which Deputy Mayor Holliday just mentioned with respect to a full out build. That is, we have to be very careful for this to become a reality. We want to make sure that it happens. We want to make sure that we create those jobs. We want to make sure that we're hiring locally. But in order to do all that, you recognize that we have to build it in phases. It can't, 700 acres can't happen all at once. That's just the nature of it. It's a significant major undertaking.
Yeah, I understand.
And I know you realize that.
Yeah, I understand, but as part of this initial phase, there needs to be some community uses that are also put forth, because anything that's promised and not actually put down on paper, we cannot.
No, that needs to happen now, and we get that, and recommendation 18, I think, should answer that question.
Alrighty,
for
thank
you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you. Next speaker, Patricia Edwards. Good afternoon, Patricia. Welcome. You have 5 minutes. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much. My name is Patricia Edwards. I've only been living in Etobicoke for the last 3 years. I had actually lived outside of the province of Ontario and Toronto. I was born here until I was 18, and then I moved to Quebec to apprendre la langue française. So moi, je suis parler français aussi. Coming back in 2010 to the city, to where I was born, to see what government does to local communities has really, I guess, somewhat hit my heart. I don't think that communities trust the government. I feel that they sometimes feel left out, feel that they're going to fall through the cracks, especially those who are less fortunate, have less on their side, and they don't feel that there's enough in the community to help them get out from where they are. To me, I understand that government is supposed to help, even if it's one individual, get out from underneath the rocks. Looking at the planning, you're opening up a big casino, lots of stores, restaurants and everything. I don't see any community center, or sorry, a daycare center in that planning. If you're going to hire people from the community, there isn't enough spaces to put kids in daycare. So the number one problem is people are saying, I can't go to work, even if you are offering me the job, because I got no place to put my kid. If the developer will put an on-site daycare within their facility, I think that would be a number one plus for the community. That way the person can go to work and actually be close to their child while they're in the daycare, and even take a lunch with their child, because the daycare would be then on-site. And I think that would be an exponential position to have for them, to have one on-site for their own employees. And that would be something that might be added to the planning. As they save for transportation and roads and things like that, that's okay as long as the price stays the same and it doesn't get outrageous, like $5 to $10 to get into this place. If you can keep it with the TTC and at a reasonable rate of $3.50 or whatever to get into the site from outside other communities, I think that would be extensional. Like they say, having bike paths, they want to put bicycle rails, but no bikes. If there's no paths, why have something to hook your bike up to? Doesn't make sense. And integrating in from Rexdale and all the other communities, I just feel that the people, and from what I hear, they just feel like they're going to be left out. They're going to fall through the cracks, and it'll be all because of council not listening. So take the time, think about it. Like I said, daycare is probably the number one thing why people can't get work in this city, because the lists are too long and there's no place to put children. So if you want to make it so that people can come in from the community to work at the Woodbine, there needs to be some place to put their kids. And we want to get people off welfare. Even if it's 1 or 2 or 3, it doesn't matter. We need to give them something to get ahead. Give them something to dream about. They see this billion-dollar project happening, and they feel like they're chump change. And the people of Toronto, of Etobicoke, don't need to feel like chump change. And this is what the feeling I'm getting, that council may want to appoint its own people that the community hasn't been able to talk to or get to have a relationship. Where with the TCBN, people have talked to them, people have relationships with them, people trust them that they are going to put forth the vision of how they see Toronto, Etobicoke, and this great province of Ontario, all in a whole, as we'd like to believe that this is. Trust me, being outside of Ontario for the last 25 years, Toronto was laughed at big time with a lot of things you do. We laughed in Quebec when you guys amalgamated all the communities together.
We're out of time.
So I'm just showing you what may be happening outside of Ontario as they watch you do the project, so that you're not laughed at outside Ontario.
Question, Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Thank you for speaking to us.
No problem.
Can you unpack a little bit the daycare? Is there any thought, are you advocating for a daycare provided by the employer? Is it limited to
Yes.
the employees only of the company?
Preferably the employees of the company, because if you're employing like hundreds of people, then you know you've got hundreds of children going into the daycare. If you can open it for outside, open it to the outside, but definitely for the employees, because there isn't enough companies out there who are making it easy for their employees to come to work. A lot of them are on TTC lines, yet they don't want to help their employee by giving them, say, we'll pay part of your pass to get you into the work. You know, so.
Should we be mandating that then, here and now? Is that the suggestion?
Well, like I said, because you're talking about roads and building, they're building the casino, they're building the restaurants and everything. What should be added to that is a daycare site, so that the people who that they are employing has a place to put their child, because right now in Etobicoke, forget it, the waiting list to put a child in daycare is astronomical.
So there are some commercial buildings here. Now, you'd have to spend some time kind of going through the details about the permissions and so on, but if a private daycare operator set up in one of those,
Unfortunately, private is not good. We want either public or nonprofit, because private is way too much. It's almost $2,500 to stick a child in a private daycare.
Oh, I know.
In a public, it's only $1,500, and even after you get money from you, it's still $800 a month. That's $200 per child. Coming from Quebec, I got to live with a $7 daycare. I was able to make $30,000 a year working a full-time job and put both my children into daycare and still be able to work and not feel like I'm being strapped, like I'm counting pennies to buy milk.
All right, thank you, Patricia. Our next speaker, Barry Marsh. Good afternoon, Barry. Welcome. Thank you for your patience. You have
Good
5 minutes,
afternoon.
sir.
Thank you for the opportunity to address council. My name is Barry Marsh, and I'm a resident of Etobicoke North, and I'm just here to speak a bit on the development. Our community is concerned regarding the public consultation request for integration of public spaces within the proposed development. The Woodbine development project is being designed and referred to as a city within a city. The issues surrounding this type of approach to development is the concern that such development could become an exclusive enclave, with the surrounding community shut out from economic gains, which would deny any form of possible community revitalization. As it stands, the proposed development plans show a designated park area to be incorporated into the second phase of the development. However, as it is uncertain if or when the second phase of the proposal will move forward, the City of Toronto should ensure that the community access and green space accommodation be incorporated into all the phases of development. In addition, with the proposed plans, there are no details indicating how the transit will connect with the surrounding community, and as the site is bounded by Highway 427 to the west, Highway 27 and industrial zones to the east, and railway and industrial lands to the south, there's very little natural access available. With these conditions, it is easy to intentionally or unintentionally create barriers to the growth and inclusiveness of the community. As an alternative, we would like to ensure that the development aims to foster community engagement through the use of ideas such as programmed public space, example, parks, daycare, as well as sufficient reliable transit access. This would be an important step not only to strengthening and empowering the local community, but will also be beneficial to the success of Woodbine development. And by attempting to make the Etobicoke North a region and a destination to visit, it would maximize financial benefit to the City of Toronto, Brookfield Business Partners, Ontario Gaming, and Woodbine Entertainment Group. To address these concerns, we request that the Toronto Community Benefit Network and local partners be at the table in order to represent the interests of the community. As a community, we call for the City of Toronto to ensure that a signed comprehensive community benefit agreement is created with targets, timeline, and a mechanism for monitoring put in place. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Questions? Deputy Mayor Hall, did a question?
Thank you. Same questions before about the concerns over the land use and the city within the city and the integration of the community. Do you have any physical changes or advice that you'd like to give the council? We've got the draft plan of subdivision, and what we heard from the planner was the inclusion of public streets creates that connectivity. Do you have advice to the contrary?
There's no part on the first phase of the development. There's no parks or facilities like that in the first phase. Of course, it's in the second phase, but as was pointed out earlier, the second phase may or may not be developed.
Fair enough.
It's
So one of the speakers before you reached and made the point that there was this desire to have everything done, all of the comprehensive components in it. I don't know the economics of that. I don't believe that's the proposal before us. Is there a position of the community, if it's all or none, would you rather have all or none?
So that is what it's faced with, all or none? Well,
I don't know.
That means the committee spaces would have to be in the first phase. If you're saying that it cannot be integrated.
It hasn't been proposed to us that way. It's been proposed in phases. So my concern is that the point has been brought forward that there's a desire to do all of this at once. But if the outcome of that was, well, forget it, won't do anything, what's better for the community, all or none?
That's a question that's difficult to consider, all or none.
Fair
but
enough.
at the same time, the community don't want to be isolated from or not included in that development.
Thank you, sir. Our next deputant, Farida Ram. Good afternoon, welcome, Farida. Thank you for your patience. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
I live on Hullerich Drive, and I am here to represent myself and about 12 to 15 residents in my area. And I recognize that this is one of the largest development the city will see and probably has seen in the last 30 plus years. I guess it's 6.4 acres of where the casino will be on. And then there's about 57 acres of the entertainment complex, the convention center, and all the other stuff we've heard today. I understand as well that the site will eventually be linked up with TTC, Metrolink, UP Express, and all that, but there will still be a significant amount of vehicular traffic on the roads. And our concern, we live in the Humberwood subdivision, and we've been there over 25 years. The area has developed greatly. Like Tridel put in 2 apartment buildings in excess of 900 units. Developments are still being approved in the area, and the plan calls for the extension of Humberwood throughout the site, going over, crossing Rexdale, and going into the lands. I believe it's Street A, We would like to see that street closed, permanently deleted from the plan. It will be abutting the residential lands. The willows are there and a street there. Those willows may end up dying because of the pollution from the cars, and as well, you know, the road salt that's going to come up there gradually as time goes by. Attended the community meeting in September, and what was most shocking was the fact that it was for all 3 applications. There were, I'll say no roads, literally no roads. One collector road which came out to Neartic, and it was a joke because Humberwood is a collector street. There are just 2 lanes. You know, when the bus is there, and the council who approved Humberwood subdivision 30 plus years ago didn't have the foresight to even have or request that bus bays be in. So like, you know, we are stuck behind buses. There are thousands of residents in Humberwood, and I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with Humberwood subdivision. And I would say that all council members should be familiarizing themselves with the area. Traffic is very congested. Rush hour in the mornings, we cannot, like I live on Hulrick, which dead ends right at Humberwood, and some mornings I cannot get out, you know. Rexdale is congested from all the rigs and all the traffic. The traffic report which was done was I think very inadequate. One was available dated February 12th. One of the comparisons that they used for the live entertainment was the complex, the Richmond Hill Center of the Performing Arts, which has a 700 seat capacity. Their complex or their entertainment venue is going to have 4,100 seats. Like, I don't know how you can compare the two. Like, there's a lot of traffic which is going to come onto Rexdale. The plan is to have the main entrance at Queen's Plate. Queen's Plate is already signalized right now. And I don't know, they already have an entrance below the 427. It's called Entrance Road. And I don't know why they do not have an entrance and an exit there. Why wasn't there a proposal? One of the 21 conditions was to market to foreigners who will be coming to the airport. A lot of people get to the site from Highway 27. Why isn't there an exit directly from the 427 and an entrance directly into the racetrack? It could be called Woodbine Parkway, something like that, that, you know, denotes, you know, where you're going.
Wrap up, please. You're almost out of time.
Okay. Anyway, I was glad to see that the residential phase 2 subdivision was off. I sent a letter to the planner on behalf of myself and the residents on November 15, 2017, and I've made copies for all you folks so that you can get a feel for because it dealt with a lot of issues. We have a problem currently even getting into our subdivision, which is the only entrance on Rexdale. If there's an accident right there, we cannot get in to the street.
All right, thank you. You can do the clerk here, and he'll distribute them right here, Brad.
Thanks.
Okay, are there any further speakers?
Oh, can I just add one thing? The traffic reports and the numbers, which I found was grossly understated, which was done February 12th. The numbers coming out of my street, and they only did it peak hours, Friday night and Saturday night. The number of people who's going to come and visit this casino, and all the sports events they're going to have and everything,
okay.
It's like, you know.
Okay, we got you. Thank you. You're out of time. Thank you. Okay, any further speakers before we bring it into committee? Seeing no further speakers, questions of staff. Councillor DeGiorgio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I understand in speaking to staff that this particular application is subject to provincial minister's order that limits basically the type and of development that can occur on the site. I also understand that there was a zoning bylaw adopted by the City of Toronto in 2007 that also limits the kind of development on the site. And so my question is, while there's a lot of talk about community benefits being attached to this particular development, what kind of an agreement will be entered into to secure the community benefits?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe that the actual form of the agreement has been fully articulated yet. The city manager is preparing a report for the April 17th executive committee, which will outline a lot of the detail in the community benefits agreement itself. So the term that's being used, a community benefits agreement here, is not the traditional, or sorry, not what we would traditionally call community benefits in a Section 37 sense. It's much wider ranging than that. Okay. It's about all of the things that council has asked the applicant to look at through conditions 13 through 21 on council's approval and principle.
Okay, so what I'm driving at is, if there is an agreement to be signed, which parties are subject to that agreement? Does it include the community? Does it include the city? Does it include the applicant? All three or two?
Did you want to answer? I can take a shot at it, but.
Well, the agreement will be between the City of Toronto and the proponent.
Okay, so it's a two-party agreement. It doesn't involve the community in terms of identifying the kinds of community benefits. Would you agree?
Well, we're kind of getting into the issues going.
Okay, so that'll come to executive committee, so I'll address those issues at executive committee. My last question, unfortunately, because I haven't really looked at this regulation that was adopted by the minister. It says here in recommendation, or at least item 10 on page 9, it says that City Council requests the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing to remove the provincial minister's zoning order filed as regulations 68898 once the zoning bylaw amendments and recommendations 1 and 2 of this report are in full force and effect. What the heck does that mean? When will they be in full force and effect? After all these agreements are secured and everything else?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor. So in 1998, the province introduced the minister's zoning order, which provided for electronic gaming and slot machines specifically. That's what's in the minister's zoning order. So that's why you have the zoning bylaw amendments before you today to add effectively table gaming to the uses on the property, as well as to encode those uses that the minister put in place through a minister's zoning order. So I should say, should City Council agree with the zoning bylaw amendments to provide for the term gaming establishment on the Woodbine lands in both the grandstand and the gaming district, then the minister's zoning order would be effectively become redundant, and so we would ask that it be lifted so that the city would be in control of the uses on the land through our own municipal bylaws rather than relying on the provincial zoning order.
Okay, so my last question is this. If the local councillor, as representative of his community, attempts to affect somehow the actual community benefits that are in the agreement, to what extent will his participation be entertained?
Again, that's, sorry, Councillor, that's a question that the staff that's preparing the report for executive committee would be better positioned to answer.
Okay.
But at a large scale, I would suggest that one of the things that we have heard loud and clear is that the community wants, if you will, a place at the table when the community benefits agreement is being finalized, and I think that sentiment is going to be reflected in that staff report.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Nunziata had a question.
Yes, to Chris Berlinger. So Chris.
Let him get to the podium, hang on. Come all the way from
Give him 5 minutes to relax.
Okay, so Chris.
Welcome to the West, Chris.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Nunziata had a question. I'll restart your time.
Chris, so you were involved in the community meetings and so forth, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so as you heard from the community today, really all the questions were around community benefits. So as far as the report for community benefits, that will be part of your report?
It will be part of the city manager's report.
Right.
That will come to executive. That report will include advice to council on how to address the conditions not before community council today.
Okay, so all the comments that were made at the community consultation meetings and that, so all those requests and all those comments will be incorporated into your input into the report with the city manager?
They will be, yes, they will be addressed in the city manager's report. All of the comments from the community meeting,
right?
Much of what was heard today, as well as we've had other meetings with Toronto Community Benefits Networks and other representatives. All of that information will come forward.
Okay, now as far as the community benefits, the report will be going to executive, and then the report then the city council will work with the community on some of the recommendations in the executive report, and the city would administer the community benefit. It would be the city that would administer the report, correct?
I don't
just explain a bit how it works so the community understands how it's going to work.
From the direction given by council in
Right.
2015.
Yes.
When council identified and set the 21 conditions.
Right.
That is the scope of the conversation that staff have been having with the community and with the proponent. It's within what council gave us to work with. We have been doing that. The city manager report that comes forward will address all of those conditions. And certainly the ward councillors have been very involved in interactions with their constituency. Both were present at the community meeting.
So there'll be opportunities in the future as well that there'll be some community reps that would be sitting with the councillor in the city, like as a working committee, to implement some of these recommendations.
The staff report will provide advice to council in that regard, yes.
Okay, just for clarification so people know how it's going to work. Now, as far as the consultation meetings, and I'm not sure, I don't think this would be a community benefit, maybe I can ask planning and staff, but as far as there was a number of questions that were asked to hire local residents for the jobs, right, on this, now, I do recall a few years ago that there was a report that went through executive on future developments that come in, that we reach out to the local groups to apply for some of these, to work with the developers on some projects, to hire the local groups that are in the area to hire them for these projects. Like I have in my ward Hammerheads, and I know that every development that's come in my ward, I have made that a condition with the developer that they work with Hammerheads and hire the local youth. So would that be part of this project to the planning staff?
It's actually not planning
Oh,
staff.
it's you?
It's
Okay, I wasn't
actually
sure.
Part of
Okay.
the community benefit
Yes.
conditions.
Is that part of community benefit?
Absolutely, and that was one of the clear 21 conditions that council gave us to work with. So
So-
it will be addressed in
So
the
that was
report.
part of that recommendation that was adopted by executive a few years ago?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
We will be reporting back on how to implement that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doucette, question?
Yes, thank you. We received a supplementary report this morning, this afternoon, sometime today, which means that we probably haven't had much chance to read it. Could you just outline very quickly what it is saying? I think it's talking about the condition 1, which staff had a trouble with in the report I read on the weekend.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes. So again, what staff provided commentary on for ultimately council's consideration is conditions 1 through 12. And effectively what our staff said in our report is staff were of the opinion that conditions 2 through 12 had been fully satisfied. Ultimately it's council's decision, but in our opinion they had been. Condition 1, as Ms. Tom spoke about earlier, basically had two functions to it. One was that it had to be an integrated complex, and one was it had to be built concurrently at the time for effectively the casino came forward. In terms of the built form, Catherine addressed the built form connectivity around the casino and how that got to the integrated nature of the first condition. What we were concerned about was making sure that it was built at the same time, because that was a phrase that council inserted into the end of condition 1. So we, through conversations with Woodbine and their agent, said we wanted assurances about how the Woodbine Square would be developed and built concurrently with the casino building. And so what we received from Woodbine was a letter dated, I believe it was March 27th, which outlined all of the things that Woodbine had agreed to in terms of building out the Woodbine Square, which effectively is across Queens Plate Drive from the casino building. So in our opinion, they have satisfied the built concurrently component of council's condition 1. So the supplementary report says that staff are of the opinion that condition 1 has been satisfactorily addressed as well.
Okay, perfect. Next question. On page 18, under heritage, it said that this was currently listed on the city's heritage registry, but when you went out to look, it was determined that listed heritage buildings no longer existed on the site. What happened to our heritage buildings? Why are they history?
I'm not sure what happened to them, but over the course of development, over the many years that Woodbine has been there, they have gone.
Disappeared. No trace of them. Nothing. So that means that this property will no longer be on the city's heritage registry, right? Right. Okay. All right. Perfect. Well, not perfect, but I'd love to have known what this building. Someone's got to have photographs somewhere. Yeah. Anyway. We heard today about daycare. I think for me that was, you hit the nail on the head there. How and at what stage does that get put on the table? I'm sure you heard about it during consultation. We've heard about it today, and that really does make sense. People can't work unless they have affordable, not expensive, affordable daycare. Is that going to be part of your planning side moving forward, or is that going to be part of the another section which goes to executive? Anyone can answer that one.
Through the chair, it's not part of the proposal that is currently in front of council today. We typically would negotiate, for example, provision of city daycare facilities through Section 37 commitments. But as Ms. Tom explained, there is no increase in height or density that's attaching itself to the proposals that are in front of us today. So there is no Section 37 application per se. But we certainly hear the community loud and clear. We will certainly discuss the applicant as they go through their site planning applications about those kinds of uses. It does seem to make sense on the property. We would also recognize that although graphically on the overhead that was shown by Mr. Dragisevich, the park, it is actually 7 acres. It is a really significant piece of property that the city is achieving, and we're getting that through phase 1. When the other developments come along, there is possibilities for example, a community center on 7 acres. There's possibilities for a city-run daycare on that. So as development comes through, and as the notion of how to utilize that park and how to tie it into the residential community that will emerge on these lands come forward, we think that would be the appropriate opportunity to really delve into that.
So you will write it down somewhere so it won't get lost in phase 1, 2, 3, 4.
We
whatever.
absolutely will.
I think a daycare by the stables would be brilliant. Now we keep talking about what's going to executive. Oh, sorry, one more question. What
Last
date
question.
is the executive meeting? We've been talking about it going to executive. Which meeting is it going to?
It's
But
scheduled.
when is this one?
it's
What's the date?
scheduled- It's scheduled for April 17th.
Okay.
And the intent is that should Community Council move this report forward today, it will go to City Council on April 24th. And should Executive Committee move the City Manager's report forward on the 17th, both reports would come together at City Council on April 24th.
And
Councilor Mammoliti, the question.
Residents can speak at executive for 5 minutes.
Councilor
That's not a
Mammoliti?
question.
So this council is never going to vote for a daycare right beside a gambling hub. It's not going to happen. People want to gamble and drop off their child, that's ridiculous. Anyway,
Okay,
that's just my opinion.
okay, stop.
So-
Question.
Don't mean to rebel rouse here. So we've got a site plan here, really a plan of subdivision that talks about phases. I did this in Ward 7 at Weston Road and Finch. Can someone tell me whether or not it was beneficial for the community to have a 3 or 4 phased approach in that site, or whether we should have gone along with the original plan the way it was? And I'm getting to my point here, because I know what the answer is going to be, I think.
Okay, I'm sorry, Councillor, I don't understand the question.
So-
Are you talking about a single-phase development here, or are you talking about?
Just an example of Finch and Weston Road. There was a four plan site. It was, you know where it is. It's on the east corner of the intersection, and we agreed to a whole plan, and we then agreed that forget the whole plan. We're going to go with one phase at a time. Did they change the application on us after the first phase?
Yes, the applicants have come in for additional zoning bylaw amendments for additional buildings and heights, yes.
So what we agreed to initially really wasn't the case because we agreed on the phase approach after that.
Council has said yes to the subsequent application.
So this could happen on this site, right?
I fully expect it will happen as market conditions change, as things evolve, as potential LRT and GO stations arrive on the site. I fully anticipate that will be the case.
All right. So I'm saying it because the local councilors should know and the community should know that this could change, and it could be a simple application to committee of adjustment or another rezoning change for the second, third, fourth phase or whatever it is. That could happen.
Well, what council has to understand is in 2007, City Council provided for an extremely wide range of land uses and a very heavy provision of land uses on these lands in order to try to promote the Woodbine Live notion. So there are already existing on these lands extremely extensive land use permissions.
Okay. But again, what is now entertainment on first phase could very easily be changed later on with an application for residential or for commercial or whatever they want to put in it.
Well, they do have commercial on there now. Residential is extremely problematic on any of the Woodbine lands other than where they're currently permitted because of the noise corridors coming off the airport. So unless the airport closes down, residential on anywhere else on these lands is extremely problematic. Plus, we also have to recognize, Councillor, for those lands that don't have residential permissions now, the lands are designated for employment uses, and it brings into question the municipal comprehensive review and that whole issue.
Why has there not been any attempt to create a secondary plan in conjunction with this plan? Is there a reason why that discussion never took place? I'm really glad you're ready for this question. I'm sure you anticipated it.
Well, I heard it in the conversation.
And the reason I'm asking this question is because many of the community groups that are looking for the spots that they're looking for, whether it's recreational or otherwise, could have simply been addressed with a secondary plan in the much larger community.
Okay, with all due respect, Councillor, I would have to disagree with you. And the reason I'm showing this map is because this really outlines it. All of these lands here, so this is the Woodbine lands, this is the rail line here. This is the Woodbine lands in their totality.
Okay.
As you can see, they're designated for employment uses. All of the lands to the south, all of the lands to the east, and these lands to the north and the east are all designated employment. So any land use study would basically, for all of those lands, would not come forward except in the municipal comprehensive review.
Which is every 5 years?
Which is, well, it used to be under the old Planning Act every 5 years. It's now up to the local council to decide when they want to do it. We'll have to also be honest about that, is it's not coming forward at any time soon because we still have the previous municipal comprehensive review tied up at the municipal board.
What if there was a study that indicated, and led of course by the councillors, or that very clearly would say, well, you know, this piece of industrial land doesn't really work. the way it should work. Maybe one day it should be looked at in that comprehensive
Last question,
phase.
that was the last question.
So, Counselor, what you have to understand is the term municipal comprehensive review is used in that way for exactly that point. It has to be a citywide municipal comprehensive review. Individual requests for properties or locations or any other areas will not be reviewed in and of themselves because it's not part of the municipal comprehensive review, and by provincial legislation, we can't do it.
Councillor Ford, the question.
Sorry, could I just finish the rest of
Sure,
this
yeah,
conversation?
absolutely.
So
Yep.
the other aspect of that, Counselor, are the other lands that surround the Woodbine lands.
I'm not allowed to ask any more questions, so this is like teasing me.
No, no, no. Well, I just want to finish it. This is the Woodbine Mall in red, which is designated mixed uses. So no land use study is going to change that land use on those lands because it provides for a wide range of uses. The other lands in the vicinity are a small component here of apartment designated lands which are fully built out. You have these lands which are now being fully developed with townhouses. You have a small commercial plaza. You have a large swath of ravine land which is never going to get redesignated. So if you were to do a land use study in the area, the only areas that you would redesignate would be two stable residential neighborhoods, which I don't think the local residents want redesignated to higher order uses. So a secondary plan in this vicinity will not get you anything.
Councillor Ford, the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Etobicoke North has gained so much attention today. I love it. So I know we're speaking about many different aspects of this report. It's a very large, complicated report. I am going to keep my questions strictly to what's in front of us, 1 to 12, and I know community benefits is a massive part of this report, but I'll save those questions for executive committee, when I'm sure I'll see many of you there as well. But specifically to the planning conditions, so you said it, but I want to be very clear that all conditions that City Council has sent out from 1 to 12, in staff's opinion, have been satisfied.
Yes, in our opinion, that's correct. Given the information that came in from Woodbine through their letter of March 27th, yes, we were prepared to put that in front of council.
Right, and so city planning, and I know this throughout the course of the negotiations and working with all the parties at the table. So the parkland has been set aside.
Yes, that's right.
In phase 1.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's one thing that I should have mentioned while I was up there, as the parkland is being obtained in phase 1, absolutely.
Right, so we do have that.
Well, once council says yes, and once the bills
Theoretically,
are approved and the community benefits and everything else comes forward, then yes.
Right, and so now I'd like to switch my questions to transportation, because this is one of my biggest concerns that have crossed our desks, and I know Farida's here, which is actually a very important topic of discussion that should be had here. So would you say that we have somewhat of a problem in the Humberwood-Rexdale corridor in terms of traffic?
Through the chair, I would characterize the existing conditions as congested.
Congested, yes. So with that being said, and going forward, a casino or this entertainment complex will generate traffic. No doubt about that. Do we have plans in the near future and beyond as this rolls out to have significant changes to the road networks on our books?
Through the chair. So this application was subject to the submission of a traffic impact study, as many other applications are required to submit in terms of the supporting materials. And through the review of the traffic impact study, there were road improvements that were recommended in the study and we concurred with. And they range from new traffic signals along Rexdale as one example, geometric changes, which may include new traffic lanes, changing of existing signal timing plans and whatnot. So there's a whole series of road improvements that were recommended, at least at a very high level. And the reason why I say that is because while those recommendations while those improvements were recommended, we don't know at this point which specific blocks or development blocks will trigger those road improvements.
Right.
So we have that as a high level, and then one of the recommendations, which is in the planning staff report, is that the proponent be required to submit updated traffic impact studies for each development block, which then we can fine tune and determine what road improvements are going to be attributed to the development of that particular block.
So the conversations around connectivity and transportation are not done here. As new blocks get developed in the future, whenever that may be, they will still have to hand in traffic impact studies.
Through the chair, that is correct. However, you mentioned the word of connectivity. In terms of the available roads and the new public roads that are proposed, this is it. Right? This is it. What's shown on the draft plan of subdivision, those are the new roads. But in terms of other road improvements, they will all be hashed out through the review of those updated traffic impact studies that I just referenced.
Correct. And the traffic impact study goes beyond the site itself. It goes and it looks at the Humberwood community, the Rexdale corridor, so it goes beyond the site.
Through the chair, normally when a traffic impact study is submitted for development, then the retained consultant would contact the city to determine what is their proposed scope in terms of study area. And there's a bit of give and take, so we negotiate with them and determine, well, we think this intersection should be included for these reasons, and then we try and reach an agreement with that. So it usually does go beyond the site, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. Councillor Crisanti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is Chris still here?
He's still here.
He's still here. Thanks, Chris. So, Chris, just so we're clear on, and by the way, thank you for all your commitment and participation in this. And in the last community benefits meeting that we had, you mentioned earlier when Councilor Nunziata asked you that you'll be forwarding a report to executive. So that report will obviously have recommendations in terms of how that community benefit agreement will move forward, and you'll make those recommendations to executive, and then that goes to council. So what is the process at that point? How do we ensure that we have a community benefit agreement that we can count on in terms of how it's negotiated between the city and the developers? Is that something you can answer?
The report coming to executive from the city manager will address the 8 remaining conditions. So everything that is not before you today at Community Council will be addressed in that report, including advice to council on how to implement all of the elements of a community benefits agreement.
All right, so you, go ahead.
The requirement is actually a planning response in terms of how the community benefit agreement or the city proponent agreement is tied into the land use approvals.
Okay. Neil?
Is that better? Yep. So what we have done is we have put a condition of approval in the recommendations about the community benefits agreement, and I would turn you to recommendations
18.
5 A through D on page 6, page 7, okay, which talks about the community benefits agreement, and it needs to be in place and to good standing before the subdivision agreement is entered into and before the zoning bylaw gets approved. So in other words, the assurances that council will have is there will be a contractual agreement by way of the subdivision agreement which will have that requirement for the community benefits agreement in it.
It's a legally binding agreement.
It will be a legally binding agreement between two parties that has the also has the additional heft of being in a signed agreement between the municipality and the property owners and the tenants. is the way we want to set it up.
Would the community be afforded additional opportunities to participate prior to that agreement being signed and sealed?
You're back
Or
over to Chris.
Back over to Chris.
The report coming forward from the city manager will provide council with advice regarding the 8 conditions, the 8 outstanding conditions. There will be no more opportunity for negotiation between now and that report. That report will provide advice, should council choose to accept that advice, on how to set up a process going forward that ensures there is community involvement moving forward.
All right. So even though there's agreement in place, doesn't mean that as future development comes together, that additional, that the agreement can't could continue to be amended as we move forward with the development.
Staff are working within the parameters set by council in 2015. The agreement that we are providing advice to council with respect to is governed by those parameters. If council chooses to do something different, staff will do as instructed. At the moment, we're working with the 8 conditions regarding community benefits that council approved in 2015. We have no authority to go beyond that scope because that's what the direction council gave us.
All right, so then it would be important then for whomever can come out and depute that they come out at the executive committee to do just that.
It's always, yeah, Councillor, you know my response.
Yes.
Of course, citizens coming to speak to politicians, absolutely.
I just want them to know that they have that. All right, thank you, Chris.
Chris,
And,
Chris, stay there, Chris.
Go ahead, I'm done.
Councillor George, you had a question for Chris?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, he has to talk to Chris, so
Just a
with
very
that,
quick,
gang's
I'm
all
not
here.
sure
so-
you're the right person for me to ask this of, Chris, but it's a 2-party agreement between the city and the applicant. If,
As council directed in 2015.
understood.
Yes.
If someone is unhappy, let's say the community's unhappy with the conditions that are being put forward to executive committee, who has appeal rights?
So every member of the public has the ability to speak at executive committee. That's the opportunity for the community.
But they don't really have the opportunity, if they're not happy, they can't really appeal the benefits agreement, correct?
Correct. It's an agreement between as directed by council. It's proposed as an agreement between council and the proponent.
If the city imposes a condition on the applicant that he's not happy with, does he have the opportunity to appeal?
You're
Okay, you're not the right person to ask.
Yeah, let's get to a city manager report. The challenge here, Mr. Chair, is we're just, getting into a report that hasn't yet been. We have a city manager.
Chris, I think this is for Neil, so your last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Cresswell, I just want to be really clear on this. We're approving Phase 1 today, which is the hatched area on the diagram. So that includes blocks 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, and what I just roughly characterize as the parkland over here.
Also Block 7, which is the stormwater management pond.
And the stormwater management pond, okay.
Correct. And some of the public roads as well. Yep.
And the public road. So there's a time frame in here of 20 years. And is that carved in stone? Is that an estimate about how long this will take?
That is the information that was provided to us by Woodbine Entertainment Group about what they anticipated would happen to build out the northern portions of these lands.
Okay. Block 9 and 10 are linked inextricably with each other at this point in time. And Block 10 is the casino, so we can assume that those would be built first.
I think that's a very safe assumption.
And probably immediately. Okay. What I wanted to do is ask you to address some of the criticisms about the connectivity with the community and the provision of open space, because on these site plans I see a lot of open space. And what I heard today was that this site doesn't relate to the community around it, and there aren't places to go in this space, even though the parkland is included in Phase 1. Are there open spaces here, and how did it pass the gates of planning? Because they were very serious criticisms of this plan.
Right, and that's understood, and it's difficult to envision what the redevelopment of these lands in their totality could look like. We actually speak to it in the staff report on page, bear with me here, page 22. Woodbine has actually developed what they call a concept master plan for the entirety of their lands. And so what you see in front of you today is, for one of our terms, the start of the build-out of that concept plan in its entirety. It provides for Folsom Public Roads, bike lanes, retail uses, all of these other uses. It will develop itself out. It will provide for playing fields as Woodbine has visualized them. We did not put it in the staff report because in order to have council say yes to the concept master plan, for example, it would be taking massive leaps of faith about what would be happening over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years, which Woodbine was not prepared to commit to today, which staff were concerned about putting it in front of council and say, here, endorse this because it may change in the future. There is a plan. I believe Woodbine has posted it online somewhere if the public wants to look at it. It does show a greater level of connectivity than shows in the graphic on attachment 4. Attachment 4 seems kind of bland. It's just a bunch of black and white lines. If you actually look at the concept plan, I have a previous version of it here. It creates the connectivity that breathes outward instead of breathing inward. The challenge is trying to visualize it today when you have this sea of asphalt and concrete and parking lots, and then you say, well, we're going to get a casino here, we're going to get Queens Plate Drive here, we're going to get Woodbine Square here, the start of Woodbine Square. That's connectivity. It's the start of it. It's the start of a 20-year building program. When the gentleman was speaking, gentleman, lady, I can't remember, was speaking about Highway 27 and the changes to Highway 27. Absolutely, that's a pretty desolate area. There's not a lot of pedestrian activity. Anybody that rides a bike through there takes their life in their own hands. As this builds out and starts breathing outwards toward the community, that's when you will see the changes on the larger streets around it to try to make it a more humane environment. You actually asked a good question of Mr. Dragisevich can you think of some examples? There's some great examples. Think about the U of T campus downtown. Think about what that would have looked like when they first started building U of T out. It would have been a building in the middle of nowhere. And then they built the public streets around it, and then they connected it to the community around it. What York University is going through right now is a similar exercise. Massive amounts of lands, campus stuck in the middle, and they're starting to build out the community around it and reach out to it. The tennis center, for example, is on the west side and reaches out to the community across the Humber River. The 20-year building program of Woodbine seeks to do a similar idea. As I said, the real challenge is to visualize it today when all you see is the casino building, the grandstand, and Woodbine Square stuck in a sea of parking. If you think beyond that to a grander scheme that looks outwards, then I think that's the connectivity that council is looking for, that we look for, that we say, yes, this very blank, very boring piece of paper is the start of that connectivity.
So it's not a city within a city, but it's an integrated part of the community, in planning's opinion.
Over the long run, we certainly believe it can be, yes.
Thank you.
Neil ran the clock on you. You're out of time.
That's okay.
Good answer. You ran the clock
There
on
you
you.
go.
That's
No more
good.
questions.
That's what I'm here for.
Okay, see no more speakers, or no more questions. Speakers. Councillor Ford, the local councillor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And if I could copy and paste what Neil said into what I'm about
Councillor
to
Ford,
say.
are you moving the staff?
I am, sorry. So I will be moving staff recommendations in their entirety. So, you know, I first want to start off by thanking a few people here, and then I'll jump into this report. First, I want to thank our city planning department. Ever since being elected to represent North Etobicoke, this has been the #1 file on our agenda. And I know city staff have done an incredible amount of work, specifically city planning. And I know there's a lot more people, but specifically Neil, Louisa, and Catherine. I know late nights, long weekends. So on behalf of the community, thank you. Transportation, and then I know in the city manager's office has a representative here, as well as SDFA and Chris. So this is definitely a massive project. So I want to thank the staff. I also want to thank the developers and Great Canadian and Woodbine Entertainment Group on working very collaboratively with the city, with my local office, with, I know, Councillor Crisanti's office. We've been working together. Former Deputy Mayor. I also want to say thank you to the community, because the community has gone through this once before, back in 2007, when they thought they were going to get this grand project, and it never came to fruition. And that's one of the biggest concerns I've heard representing the community. This is coming to fruition. And I think this is going to be an incredible investment, not only for our area in the Northwest, that you are all completely right, have been underinvested in. But this area has incredible potential if it is done right, if this development is done right. And I know that is what city staff, myself, and everyone at the table have been striving for. To do this right, I personally have had an open door to everyone in the community, no matter what they want to talk about, how many times they want to talk about it. We've kept that door open. We'll continue to keep that door open up until the executive, to council, and beyond. Because my hope is that this goes through, that we have a significant investment in North Etobicoke, that we can now leverage more transit, that we want, that we can connect to the airport, and look beyond just this entertainment complex, but connecting the Northwest to the rest of Toronto. I think that is very important. We've already seen that wave of investment. We already see investors coming into North Etobicoke and building it out. We have seen proof. Woodbine Woodbine Mall. We have a lot of Woodbines in North Etobicoke. Woodbine Mall is doing significant investments, and they have in the mall to revitalize it, to bring stuff back into the area. We already see that happening. If I had, a wish to make this whole concept a reality tomorrow and do phase 1, 2, 3 right now, I would. But we know that can't be done. This is a monstrosity of a development, and I think we need to do it responsible and thoughtful. I think that I want to talk about the community benefits. That is very important. That is critical. I don't think there is someone up here, or can't speak for my colleagues, but I think we all agree that they are critical to the success of this community. I want everyone to come out to the executive and have their say. That is where we will dive into this much more in depth on how it will look and what the community will have coming out of this, and continuing. And as I said, I always say continuing because this isn't going to stop here. We want to continue to work on the connectivity of Etobicoke North and transit and transportation, like Farida said. And I think she makes...
Okay.
No,
Please,
and I agree. And we've met about that, and that's why I wanted to ask transportation. That it is on the books. We need to look at how this area is going to get around. It is a residential community, and is also the city's largest employment area, and commercialized communities and factories, and so there's a balance here. And I think that we need to look at that. I know it's on the books. As the local councillor, I will be continuing to do that. So I will wrap up my comments there.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. Our next speaker is not future deputy mayor. I'm going to call you FDM for maybe future deputy mayor instead of former.
Thank you
Councillor
very much.
Crisanti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Ford. I'm just going to echo a lot of what Councillor Ford said. I think he covered it well, and I too want to thank staff. They've done a tremendous job, a phenomenal job in putting this report forward. It's I heard about all the long days and weekends and time that they put into it, But we're at a point now where I think we're, you know, we're making history in Etobicoke North. I think we have a very unique situation. We're probably the only city in North America that has 700 acres of land to develop inside their own city. And this land, every time I drive by it, you know, I've lived in this community for 35 years with my family, and every time I drive by this property, it always, you know, it's a sad thing to see that, you know, it's just an empty piece of land where there's so much potential. So now that potential is a reality. You know, I've heard comments about 10 years ago. That wasn't the right time. That particular development didn't have the proper ingredients to move it forward like it has today. Now we got people that are willing to come together. We've got Woodbine Entertainment, we've got Great Canadian, Brookfield, and other players that are saying, yes, you know, we're going to move forward. But it started with that 2015 decision on July 7th, the City Council that said, you know, we're going to approve expanded gaming conditional on certain things happening. And now we're hearing that we're at the point where the 21 conditions that are in front of us have been, you know, have been negotiated successfully, and staff is satisfied with those 21 conditions. But the three things I think I just want to highlight before I conclude, I'll start with the community benefits. I thank everyone for coming out. Thank you for taking the time and expressing your views. And I also encourage you to come out to executive if you can and do this again. But the community benefits expand beyond the Woodbine property. Already we see, as Councillor Ford mentioned, the interest in wanting to develop it within the Woodbine area. The Woodbine Mall, for example, is also has a very an amazing vision to expand and invest, and they've already invested in that mall. So the jobs are going to be created, and that's the other thing. This is about the jobs, and we recognize that we need jobs in Etobicoke North, and we recognize it to the point that we're going to ensure that the community benefits make it very, very clear. Hiring local is critical. I hold regular business roundtable meetings. I support local business. I get together with them 2 times a year, and I always encourage local business to hire locally. We got great talent locally, and this is something that we want to do. And public transit, we know that the LRT is coming, and it's currently going to terminate at Humber College. And I know that Councillor Ford and myself have been advocating and working with staff and Metrolinx and Woodbine and their partners to be part of the solution to extending the LRT where it currently terminates at Woodbine, extending at Humber, and extend it down to Woodbine at a new GO station, and then loop around to the airport so it meets with the Eglinton LRT as well. So Etobicoke North will finally get the kind of high order transit it deserves. So you get on that transit and you can go anywhere you want in the GTA in very, very short order. So again, thank you very much. I encourage my colleagues to come on board and approve the motion put forward by Councillor Ford and all the recommendations that are in front of us. Thanks very much.
I'd like to ask for a recorded vote,
Thank you,
Mr.
Councillor
Chair.
Crisanti. Seeing no further speakers, Councillor Ford has moved the staff recommendations with no amendments. Recorded votes requested. All in favor. Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor Doucette, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Crisanti, Councillor Grimes, Councillor Holiday, Councillor Ford. That carries unanimous. Thank you, everybody, for coming out today. Councillor Ford, you have a motion to introduce and enact certain bills.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that the Etobicoke York Community Council pass and declare as bylaws bills 346 to 359 and 379 to 380 prepared for the April 4th, 2018 meeting 29 of the Community Council.
Shall these bills be passed and declared as bylaws? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Holiday, you have a motion to introduce and enact the confirming bill.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair, that the Etobicoke York Community Council pass and declare as a bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceeding of the Etobicoke York Community Council acting under delegated authority at meeting 29 on April 4th, 2018.
Shall these bills be passed and declared as bylaws? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor DeGiorgio.